"Open the cage and I will tear your throat out." The voice was not hers. It came from the other side of the bars, from the mass of bodies and breath and hatred pressing against the corridor. A man screamed it like a prayer, like a promise, and the crowd answered with a roar that shook dust from the stones. "Burn her, crown her. Her hand is marked. The throne has chosen." Vayrelis jerked awake on cold metal, lungs fighting for air that smelled of iron and winter. Her wrists were raw where shackles had rubbed, but the chains were gone now. Only the cage remained, thick bars gleaming pale as moonlight, humming faintly as if the metal itself remembered every scream it had ever trapped. Moon iron. She knew the stories. It held shifters. It held monsters. It held things the court pretended did not exist. Her palm burned. Vayrelis lifted her right hand and nearly gagged. A mark, dark and bright at once, sat in the center of her skin as if it had been branded from inside her bones. A crescent like a claw, surrounded by thin lines that looked like writing in a language she did not know. The pain was not the worst part. The worst part was the certainty that no living Omega should have anything like this. A bell rang somewhere above the riot. Voices tried to layer order over chaos. Silence for the decree. Someone struck the cage with a pole, hard enough to make Vayrelis flinch. "Stand," a guard barked. "Show your mark." "I do not know you," Vayrelis said, and her voice came out hoarse, furious. "I do not know where I am. I want my brother." Laughter answered her, the cruel kind that fed on fear. "Everyone wants something," another guard said. "You want to live, so do as you are told." Vayrelis forced herself up. Her bare feet met a floor that was too clean for a cell and too public for a prison. Torches lined the corridor, and beyond them the space opened into a vaulted passage where the crowd pressed behind a second barrier of steel. She saw faces. Too many. Mouths opened in chance, eyes bright with hunger. Alphas and omegas and betas mixed together, but the alphas were the ones leaning forward like hounds who had caught the scent of blood. "Omega of the throne," someone shouted. A chant began, building like thunder. "Omega of the throne, Omega of the throne." Her stomach twisted. Yesterday she had been nobody on the black market, hood pulled low, hands quick, trading trinkets and lies for enough coin to keep herself and her brother fed. Yesterday her biggest fear had been a patrol catching her in the wrong alley. Yesterday she had a brother. Vayrelis squeezed her hand until the mark throbbed harder, as if it were alive, and pleased that it was being noticed. She searched the crowd for any sign of him, any familiar shape, any glint of the stupid silver chain he never removed. Nothing. A guard moved closer, keys clinking. "Hold your hand to the bars." "No, do it." Vayrelis swallowed down a surge of panic and anger. "If you think I am a prize, you are wrong." Something shifted in the air the way it did before a storm broke. Not weather, presence. The crowd quieted as if a blade had been drawn. Bootsteps approached, measured and controlled, each one falling like a verdict. The guard stiffened, and even the ones who looked eager a moment ago lowered their eyes. Then he appeared in the torchlight. Kaiiltar. Vayrelis did not know his face from memory, but she knew it from coins and banners and whispers. The heir of the Lunar Throne, an alpha born into discipline so severe it looked like coldness. The kind of man who could order a massacre and never let his hand shake. He wore no crown, but the space around him bent like it expected one. His gaze slid over the cage, over her bare feet, the bruises on her wrists, the quick rise of her chest. Then his eyes locked on her palm, the mark. For a moment, the expression he carried like armor cracked. Not pity, not fear, recognition. "How many times did I say no crowds?" Kaiiltar's voice was low, but it carried. A guard cleared his throat. "My lord," the regent demanded a presentation. "The hall is waiting." "The hall can wait." Kaiiltar stepped closer to the bars. "You look at me." Vayrelis lifted her chin. "I am looking." His eyes were pale, too clear, like moonlight on ice. He stared as if he could see through her skin, down into whatever secret the mark had carved into her. Then he leaned in. He inhaled. Vayrelis felt it the way a spark feels the air right before it becomes fire. The alphas behind the barrier shifted, nostrils flaring, shoulders tightening. Someone cursed under their breath like they had been struck. Kaiiltar's hands tightened on the bars. His control held for a heartbeat. Then it slipped. Not completely. Not like a beast. Just enough that she saw it, and the sight made her pulse jump with a dangerous, unwanted thrill. His pupils widened. His jaw clenched. His throat worked as if he had tasted something that did not belong in the world, her scent. It was not Omega sweet. It was not the soft, yielding pull that made alphas hungry and omegas afraid. It was wrong. It was sharp and dark, like smoke over snow. Like a song sung backward. Like the moment before a blade kisses skin. It did something to alphas that an omega should not be able to do. Kaiiltar forced himself back, the slightest tremor in his breath the only proof that he had nearly lost control. "If you are not mine," he said quietly, "you are dead." The words hit her like a slap and a kiss at once. Vayrelis stared through the bars, refusing to show fear. "Then you should kill me now and spare yourself the trouble." His gaze flicked to the crowd. "Not here." He turned to the guards. "Bind her. Full restraints. And if any of you touch her without my order, I will cut off the hand that did it." A guard hesitated. "My lord, she is an omega. She cannot fight." Kaiiltar's eyes sharpened. "You did not hear her scent." Vayrelis did not understand what that meant, not fully, but she watched the guards exchange uneasy looks as if they had. The cage door groaned open. Cold air rushed across her skin. They brought out shackles that looked ceremonial, too beautiful to be kind. Moon iron again, engraved with tiny lunar sigils. The moment the cuffs closed around her wrists, her mark flared and then dulled like a light pushed under water. Vayrelis bit her tongue to keep from making a sound. The crowd surged, howling. "Show the mark. Let us see the throne's omega. Make her kneel." Kaiiltar stepped between her and the barrier as if his body could be a wall. He did not touch her. He did not have to. The space around him declared that she belonged under his shadow, whether she agreed or not. They moved. Down corridors lined with banners, through arches carved with moons and wolves and ancient words. Vayrelis kept her eyes open, forcing her mind to take in every turn, every guard position, every door that might not be locked. The palace was a maze built to impress and imprison in the same breath. She tried to remember how she got here. The black market. The smell of spice and sweat. Her brother's hand squeezing hers once, quick and reassuring. His grin, his promise, "Stay close, I have a buyer, one more deal and we are free." Then a flash, white-hot, a sting in her palm, darkness folding over her like water, and when she woke the cage, her throat tightened. "Where is my brother?" a guard snorted. "Dead, probably." Vayrelis's vision narrowed. "Say it again." Kaiiltar did not look back, but his voice cut through. "No one speaks to her like that." The guard fell silent. They turned a corner into a covered walkway, open on one side to the city below. Vayrelis caught a glimpse of rooftops and towers, of people like ants gathering in streets, drawn by the rumor of something forbidden. A shadow moved above. The first arrow hit a guard in the throat. He collapsed without a sound, blood dark against pale stone. Chaos exploded. Ambush. Protect the air. Shifters in masks dropped from the roof beams like falling stars. They moved too fast for ordinary men, bodies shifting mid-leap, claws flashing, teeth bared. Wolves, maybe, or something close enough to wear wolf skin as a lie. Vayrelis yanked against her cuffs, pain flaring. She tried to run, but a guard shoved her behind him. Another arrow struck the stone beside her head, splintering. Someone screamed. A masked shifter landed in front of her, eyes bright with animal intent. It did not look at Kaiiltar. It looked at her. Not to kill. To take. The shifter lunged, reaching for her shackles. Vayrelis twisted away, heart pounding. The shifter's fingers brushed her wrist, and her mark burned again, a pulse of heat that shot up her arm. The shifter recoiled like it had touched a flame. For an instant, its eyes widened with something like recognition. Then Kaiiltar was there, blade out, moving with brutal precision. Steel flashed. The shifter's mask split, and it stumbled back, snarling. More came. The walkway filled with smoke, thick and bitter. Someone had thrown an alchemical bomb. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Vayrelis coughed, eyes stinging. Her chains rattled as she stumbled, trying not to be trampled. A hand grabbed her elbow. "Here," a voice said, close to her ear. "Move." Vayrelis jerked back on instinct, but the grip held firm, guiding rather than dragging. She saw him through the smoke. A man with a smile like a knife, even now. Alpha, she felt it in the way the air responded to him. He wore palace leathers, but his eyes were too amused for a loyal guard. Tyern, she did not know his name from coins. She knew it from the way other people lowered their voices when they said it, like the word itself might cut. "Who are you?" Vayrelis rasped. "Someone who does not want you dead in this hallway." Tyrn's hand slid down her arm, fingers briefly brushing the pulse point of her wrist. His touch was warm, intimate in a way that made her skin prickle. "You are shaking." "I am not." He laughed softly. "Liar." An explosion rocked the walkway, throwing them both. Vayrelis hit the stone hard, breath leaving her. Her shackles clanged, pain shooting through her wrists. Tyrn hauled her up with surprising strength. "This way, there is a service stair." Vayrelis stared into his eyes, searching for truth. "Why are you helping me?" His smile faded, just enough to show something sharp underneath. He leaned closer, voice dropping. "I waited for you," he whispered. "Your brother is alive." The words struck so hard Vayrelis almost forgot to breathe. "What did you say?" Tyrn's gaze flicked over her shoulder. "We do not have time. If you want him back, you will walk." "I will run," she snapped, and pulled away from his grip, forcing her legs to move despite the weight of the shackles. They plunged into a side stairwell. The smoke thinned, replaced by the damp smell of old stone and oil. Above them, the sounds of battle echoed, metal on metal, snarls, orders barked and broken. Vayrelis's mind raced. Brother alive, trap, lie, hope, all tangled together until she could not tell which strand would strangle her first. The stairwell ended at a narrow passage that led back into the palace. Tyrn shoved a door open. They emerged into a corridor lined with polished lunar stone. No smoke, no screams, only the distant hum of the palace's breath. Tyrn slowed, suddenly careful. "Listen to me. You were taken for a reason. You carry something they want." "My mark," Vayrelis said. It felt like saying a curse. "Yes, and your scent." Tyrn's nostrils flared slightly, as if he could not help himself. His control was better than most, but she saw the effort in his jaw. "You do not smell like an Omega. You keep saying that." He stepped closer until the heat of him pressed at her space. "Because it matters. Because it makes alphas do stupid things." Vayrelis's pulse fluttered. Part of her wanted to shove him away. Part of her wanted to lean in just to see if the knife smile would turn into something real. She hated that part. Footsteps approached. Tyrn's eyes sharpened. Too late. Kaiiltar appeared at the far end of the corridor, flanked by guards. There was blood on his sleeve. Not his, she thought, because he moved like nothing had touched him at all. His gaze snapped to Vayrelis, then to Tyrn. The air between them tightened, alpha pressure like invisible claws. "What are you doing with her?" Kaiiltar asked. Tyrn raised his hands slightly, easy and innocent. "Keeping her alive, my lord. Your guards were busy dying." Kaiiltar's gaze did not soften. "Bring her," Vayrelis tensed. "No." Kaiiltar walked toward her, slow enough to be controlled, fast enough to be inevitable. When he reached her, he stopped just outside, touching distance. The heat of him made her skin feel too small for her body. "You can refuse," he said. "You can fight, but you will still come." Vayrelis looked up at him. "Why?" His eyes flicked to her palm again. "Because the palace is already calling you its Omega, and if I do not keep you under my protection, they will take you apart to see what you are." Protection, she spat. You threatened to kill me. I threatened you because it was true. His voice lowered. If you are not mine, someone else will claim you, someone worse, and the law will smile while they do it. Vayrelis's throat tightened, anger mixing with something dangerously close to relief. I will not be claimed. Kaiiltar's gaze held hers, and for the first time she saw not cruelty but exhaustion, deep and old. You already were. He turned to the guards. To the palace, full escort, no delays. As they walked, Vayrelis caught Tyrn's eye. He gave her a small nod, almost imperceptible, like a promise that the whisper about her brother had not been smoke. Her hope hurt. They reached the main palace doors as the city bells began to ring, loud and relentless. Inside, the halls glittered with silver and moonstone. Servants pressed themselves against walls, eyes down. Nobles watched from balconies, their interest sharp as teeth. They were waiting, they always were. A wide hall opened ahead, packed with court. At the far end, under a canopy carved like a frozen wave, sat the Lunar Throne, not occupied by a king. The seat was empty, but it did not feel empty. It felt hungry. Beside it stood Archon Morwine, the regent, the one who kept order. He wore dark robes trimmed with pale thread, the kind of clothing that looked humble until you noticed the rarity of every stitch. His smile was gentle, which made Vayrelis's skin crawl. And near the front, draped in white and silver like she was a blessing given form, stood Lady Kaiiltar, head of the Omega house, saint in public, predator in every rumor. Kaiiltar's eyes fixed on Vayrelis. They did not widen with surprise. They narrowed with satisfaction. So, Kaiiltar said, voice carrying through the hall. The lost one returns. Vayrelis swallowed. I did not leave. Kaiiltar's smile did not change. You were misplaced. Vayrelis lifted her shackled wrists. The metal clinked. Is this how you treat misplaced things? A ripple moved through the hall. Soft laughter, disapproval, hunger. Kaiiltar stepped forward, her perfume sweet enough to be a weapon. Your spirit is charming. It will break nicely. Vayrelis's hands curled into fists despite the cuffs. I will not break. Onxes do not get to decide what they are, a nobleman murmured. Another answered with a laugh. Kaiiltar shifted beside her, and the murmurs quieted again. His presence was a leash on the room. Kaiiltar turned her attention to him, like a woman addressing a blade she intended to use. Heir Kaiiltar, you brought her, as expected. As ordered, Kaiiltar said. His tone gave nothing away. Kaiiltar faced the court. Attend, all. The throne mourns a bride who died before her vow could be sealed. The lunar line cannot endure a gap. The moon demands a bond. Vayrelis's stomach dropped. No, Kaiiltar continued as if Vayrelis were not a person but a candle someone had placed on an altar. This one is a replacement, chosen by ancient sign and sacred mark. She will enter the Lunar Selection. Vayrelis's voice rose, sharp enough to cut. I refuse. The hall went quiet in the way a forest goes quiet when a predator walks through. Kaiiltar's gaze snapped to her. Omegas do not refuse. I am not your Omega, Vayrelis said. I am not anyone's. A man with a scroll stepped forward, hands trembling with the importance of his role. By decree of the first lunar king, he intoned, an Omega bearing the throne mark shall be bound to the line. She shall undergo the Lunar Selection. She shall submit to trial. She shall be tested in obedience, will, and blood. The words felt like chains being wrapped around her throat. Vayrelis stared at her palm. The mark throbbed like a heartbeat. Across the hall, a figure stood half in shadow, watching her with an unnerving calm. His hair was dark, his posture relaxed, and his eyes looked like they had seen too much without learning mercy. Sevrix, alpha healer, alchemist, and the kind of man people sought when they were desperate enough to risk what he might ask in return. His gaze met hers for a moment, and the air prickled. Not attraction, not dominance, prediction. He looked at her like he had already seen her bleeding on palace stones. Vayrelis forced herself to look away. The decree ended. The hall exhaled, hungry again. Kaiiltar leaned closer, his voice barely more than breath near her ear. Do not fight them here, Vayrelis hissed back. You are part of them. His jaw tightened. I am the only reason you are still standing. Kaiiltar raised her hands, and two attendants approached with a silk mantle the color of moonlight. Dress her, present her. Vayrelis stepped back. Do not touch me. The attendants hesitated, eyes flicking to Kaiiltar for permission like frightened birds waiting for a stone. Kaiiltar did not move. Let her be, for now. Kaiiltar's smile sharpened. As you wish, Heir, but she will learn, they always do. Vayrelis's stomach turned at the certainty in her voice. She tried to breathe through it, to hold onto something solid. My brother. Her mind reached for him like a drowning hand. The court began to disperse, already turning her existence into gossip. A replacement for a dead bride. A chosen Omega, a thing, a weapon. As servants guided her through another corridor, a hand brushed hers. Quick, precise. A small vial slipped into her palm. Vayrelis froze, heart hammering, but no one reacted. The person had moved past her already like a shadow. She looked down, clear glass, pale liquid. A whisper reached her, so soft it could have been imagination. Do not drink anything Kaiiltar gives you. Vayrelis glanced up and saw Sevrix ahead, walking with the calm of a man who never ran. He did not look back. He did not need to. Her fingers closed around the vial, hiding it in her cuffed hand. They brought her to a suite in the palace that looked like a beautiful cage. Curtains like silver water, a bed too large, a mirror framed in carved moons. The door shut behind her. She heard the lock turn on the outside. Vayrelis stood still for a long moment, listening. Footsteps retreated. Voices faded. Silence. Then the mark in her palm pulsed, warm as a living thing, and something in her chest answered it with a sudden, terrifying sense of being watched. She crossed to the door and rattled it. Locked. She looked for windows. The glass was thick, warded, the moonlight outside too bright and too far away. She turned toward the mirror, intending to check her face for bruises, for proof that she was real. Words were blooming on the surface. Not etched. Not painted. Wet dark, slowly running downward as if written with blood. Do not trust Alphas. Vayrelis's breath caught. Who did this? The mirror did not answer. The letters gleamed like fresh wounds. She reached out, fingers trembling, and smeared the words. The blood did not smear, it shifted. The message blurred, rearranged, and thinned into lines that curved across the glass. A map. A simple one, but clear enough to make her pulse spike. A hidden corridor. A turn behind a panel. A stair down into the bones of the palace. Vayrelis stared at it, mind racing. Trap, help, warning. Her brother's face rose in her memory, and the ache of not knowing tore through her resolve. I will risk it. She found the panel where the map indicated, fingers searching along carved seams until something clicked. The wall opened with a soft sigh, releasing cold air that smelled of stone and old secrets. Vayrelis slipped inside and pulled the panel shut behind her. The passage was narrow, forcing her shoulders close to the damp walls. Her shackles clinked faintly with each step. She hated the sound. It made her feel owned. She moved anyway, guided by the map burned into her mind. The corridor sloped downward, the air cooled. The palace's polished beauty faded into ancient masonry. The only light came from thin seams in the stone where moonlight filtered through cracks, pale and ghostly. Then she heard it. Singing, not loud, not even fully formed. Just a voice threading through the dark, weaving notes that caught in her mind like hooks. Vayrelis stopped, breath shallow. The song was not in a language she knew, but it made her feel as if someone had reached inside her ribs and touched the strings of her heart with careful fingers. She took another step. The voice strengthened, and her thoughts began to drift, softening at the edges. No, not drift. Pull. The song was pulling her. Vayrelis clenched her teeth and forced herself forward. The corridor widened into a small chamber lit by a single lantern. A man sat on a low stone bench, posture relaxed, hands resting on his knees as if he had been waiting for her all his life. Orinder. Alpha mage singer, they said. A man who could carve sigils into air with sound, who could play emotions like instruments. He lifted his gaze and smiled. Finally, he said. Vayrelis tried to speak, but the song vibrated in her throat like it wanted to speak for her. She swallowed hard. Stop. Orander tilted his head. His eyes were too bright, too amused. You came to me, I only offered a path. I came for answers, Vayrelis said. About my brother. Orander's smile widened. Ah, always a brother, always a chain. Vayrelis took a step closer, anger forcing her control back. How do you know I am here? How do you know anything about me? Orander's voice softened, almost tender. Because they rewrote you, and I am curious to see what they could not erase. I am not a book, Vayrelis snapped. Orander's gaze held hers, and his voice slid into the air like silk over a blade. He spoke a name, her true name, not the one she used in alleys and markets, not the one she had given the guards, not even the one her brother called her when he was teasing, a name buried so deep she had not spoken it in years. Vayrelis went cold. Do not say that. Orander leaned forward, elbows on his knees, as if he were coaxing a frightened animal. You reacted. Good. That means there is still something of you left. Her fingers curled around her shackles. If you want to live, you will tell me where my brother is. Orander's gaze flicked to her palm. And if I want to see what happens when the throne's Omega learns she is not what they think. Vayrelis's mark pulsed, as if it did not like being discussed. Orander rose smoothly. He was taller than she expected, his presence filling the chamber with a subtle pressure that made her skin prickle. Your brother, he said, is closer than you want him to be. Vayrelis's chest tightened. Show me. Orander turned, walking toward a narrow stair spiraling downward. Under the palace, he said, there are cages that are not meant for the public. They keep things there they deny exist. They keep mistakes. They keep experiments. Vayrelis followed, heart pounding. Why are you helping me? Orander glanced back, smile returning like a familiar wound. I am not helping you. I am helping myself. I want to know who you were before the court put you in a collar. The stair ended at a corridor that smelled of damp and fear. Vayrelis's stomach turned. The air here was thick with old screams, the kind that soaked into stone. Cages lined the walls, not moon iron, plain bars, some bent, some clawed. Scratches raked the floor. Chains hung from hooks. Something breathed in the dark. Vayrelis forced herself to move, step by step, past cells where eyes glinted and then vanished, past a cage where a figure sat with its head bowed and its skin too pale to be healthy. A guard stood near the far end, half bored, half wary. He wore palace colors, but his posture was wrong, too loose, like a man who did not fear consequences because he had never faced any. Vayrelis's gaze snagged on something at his belt. A medallion, silver, stained with old blood. The crest of the lunar house etched into one side, and on the other side, a shallow scratch that Vayrelis recognized because she had made it herself when she was younger and bored, carving a tiny line into the edge to tell her brother's medallion from any cheap imitation. Her brother's medallion. Heat rushed into her vision. Vayrelis moved before she could think, closing the distance with a feral speed that surprised even her. She slammed into the guard, fingers clawing at his belt. He swore, stumbling, grabbing her shoulders. Little Omega, he sneered, you are not supposed to be down here. Give it to me, Vayrelis said, her voice shook with rage. Where did you get this? The guard's eyes narrowed. He backhanded her. Pain burst across her cheek. Vayrelis staggered, tasted blood, then saw red in a way she had never allowed herself to see before. Her mark flared. The guard's expression changed. Not amusement now, unease. He stepped back, hand going to his weapon. What are you? Vayrelis wiped blood from her lip with the back of her wrist, then lunged again, snatching the medallion free. The chain snapped, metal biting into her palm. For a heartbeat she held it, trembling, the cold weight of it anchoring her to reality. Then the guard shifted. Bones cracked. Skin rippled. His jaw extended, teeth lengthening. Fur erupted along his arms and shoulders. He grew, hunched, becoming a beast that was almost wolf and not wolf enough to be honest. Its eyes locked on Vayrelis with an animal hatred. Orinder took a step back, the first sign of real caution in him. The beast charged. Vayrelis did not have room to run. The corridor was too tight, her shackles too heavy. So she did the only thing she could. She stepped into the charge. She turned her body, letting the beast's momentum carry it past her, and drove her chained hands up under its jaw, using the cuffs as a brutal edge. The impact jolted her bones. The beast snarled, jaws snapping near her face. Vayrelis felt its hot breath, the stink of blood and rot. Fear tried to rise, she crushed it. Her mark burned like a second heart. She twisted. The beast's neck snapped with a sound that was sickeningly final. It dropped, heavy, twitching once before going still. Vayrelis stood over it, chest heaving, staring at her own hands as if they belonged to someone else. An Omega should not be able to do that. Orinder's mouth was slightly open, his usual amusement gone. Interesting, he breathed. A laugh echoed from behind. Vayrelis spun, medallion clenched in her fist. Tyron leaned against the corridor wall as if he had been there all along. His eyes glittered, impressed and wary. "You just did what Omegas cannot," he whispered. Vayrelis's throat tightened. "Where is my brother?" Tyron's smile softened, almost genuine. "Alive," he said again, "and closer to the regent than you want." The word regent stabbed through her hope. Before she could demand more, footsteps thundered above. Torches flared at the stair entrance. Guards flooded the corridor, and in their center, Kaiiltar. His gaze landed on the dead beast, then on Vayrelis, then on the medallion in her hand. For a moment, something like shock flickered in his eyes, then his face hardened. Vayrelis lifted her chin, forcing herself to look defiant instead of terrified. "I can explain." Kaiiltar raised a hand, stopping the guards from rushing in. "Leave us." "My lord," a guard protested, eyes wide at the dead beast. "I said leave." The guards hesitated, then retreated, dragging the beast's body away with visible discomfort. The corridor emptied until only Vayrelis, Kaiiltar, Tyron, and Orinder remained. The air felt too tight to breathe. Kaiiltar stepped closer, his gaze dropping to her wrists, to the raw skin under the cuffs, then back to her eyes. His voice was quiet. "You are not an Omega," he said, "or not only an Omega." Vayrelis swallowed. "I do not know what I am." Kaiiltar's eyes flicked to the medallion. "Where did you get that?" "From him," she said, jerking her chin toward where the beast's body had been. "It belongs to my brother." Kaiiltar's jaw tightened. "You should not have been in these corridors." "I was locked in a room like an ornament," Vayrelis snapped. "I found a map. Someone wants me to see what you keep under your palace." Kaiiltar's gaze sharpened. "Someone?" Vayrelis hesitated, then looked at Orinder. "He led me." Orinder spread his hands, unbothered. "The truth led her. I only sang it a little louder." Kaiiltar ignored him. He focused on Vayrelis. "If the court learns you killed a shifter guard with your bare hands, they will not call you chosen. They will call you a threat, and the law will demand your death." Vayrelis's pulse hammered. "Then help me leave." Kaiiltar's expression tightened, like the idea cut him. "You cannot leave." "I will," she said. "I will take my brother and disappear." Kaiiltar stepped closer until the cold discipline of him pressed against the heat in her skin. "Listen to me. If you run, Morwen will hunt you, Kamara will scent you, and every alpha in the city will feel your wrongness and come for you." Vayrelis's breath caught at the word wrongness. It sounded like a sin. Kaiiltar's gaze dipped to her mouth, just for a moment, and something hot sparked in her belly. His voice softened, barely. "I can keep you alive," he said, "but you have to stop making it impossible." Vayrelis hated how much she wanted to believe him. Tyron pushed off the wall, strolling closer as if this were entertainment. "He is right," he said. "You are already on the stage. The only question is whether you bleed for their applause or for your own escape." Vayrelis glared at him. "You said you would help me." Tyron's smile flashed. "I said your brother is alive. I did not say the truth would be kind." Kaiiltar's eyes cut to Tyron. Enough. Orinder's gaze lingered on Vayrelis's palm. Her mark is waking, he murmured. Can you feel it? The palace is answering her. Vayrelis squeezed the medallion until it hurt. I do not want the palace. Kaiiltar held her gaze. The palace wants you. He turned abruptly, as if making a decision he did not like. Back to your suite. Now, Heir, escort her. Orinder, if you sing in her corridors again without my permission, I will cut out your tongue. Orinder smiled, but there was a flicker of genuine caution. As you command, Heir. Vayrelis tried to speak, to argue, but Kaiiltar's attention was already sliding away, his mind moving faster than the corridor could hold. As Heir guided her back through the hidden passage, Vayrelis's thoughts churned. Her brother alive, her mark illegal, her scent dangerous. A dead beast at her feet, proof that something inside her was not soft enough to be an Omega. When they reached her suite, the door opened from the outside. Sevrix stood there, as calm as ever, carrying a small satchel. His eyes went immediately to Vayrelis's face, to the swelling on her cheek, to the blood at her lip. You are bleeding, he said. I noticed, Vayrelis snapped. Sevrix did not react. He stepped inside, and Heir lingered in the doorway, watching with interest. Sevrix's gaze dropped to Vayrelis's wrists. Sit. I am not your patient. Sevrix opened his satchel with steady hands. You are breathing and wounded. That makes you my patient, whether you like me or not. Vayrelis hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed, still clutching the medallion. Sevrix knelt, examining the raw skin beneath the cuffs with professional detachment. His fingers were cool, careful. The touch should have been comforting. Instead, it made Vayrelis feel exposed, like he was reading something under her skin. He paused. His gaze flicked up to her palm. Show me. Vayrelis's stomach tightened. No. Sevrix's voice remained even. If you want to live, you will show me. I already know it is there. The court knows. The regent knows. Hiding it from me changes nothing. Vayrelis swallowed. Slowly she opened her fist. The mark stared up at them, dark and bright, a moon carved into flesh. Sevrix's calm finally shifted, not fear, not disgust, grief. He exhaled as if he had been holding his breath for years. So it is true. Vayrelis's voice came out tight. What is true? Sevrix's eyes held hers. That mark is a key, he said. And it does not only open the throne. Vayrelis felt cold creep up her spine. What else does it open? Sevrix's gaze flicked briefly to Heir in the doorway, then back to her. A cage, he said quietly. A myth. A thing they insist does not exist because admitting it would unravel their laws. Vayrelis's mouth went dry. The Noct beast. Heir's smile vanished. For the first time, he looked genuinely uneasy. Sevrix reached into his satchel and drew out an amulet, small and plain, a dark stone wrapped in silver wire. Wear this, he said. It will hide your scent for a time. A time, Vayrelis repeated. Not forever. Sevrix shook his head. Nothing hides what you are forever, not from alphas, not from the moon. Vayrelis's fingers closed around the amulet. The stone felt warm, as if it had been held close to someone's skin. Why are you helping me? She asked, voice rough. Sevrix's expression did not soften, but something in his eyes did. Because I have seen what they do to Omegas who are convenient, he said, and I have seen what they do to anomalies. Vayrelis swallowed. Am I an anomaly? Sevrix met her gaze. You are the reason the court is smiling, he said, and that is the most dangerous thing in this palace. Vayrelis's grip tightened on the amulet. What do you want from me? Sevrix stood, closing his satchel. To keep you alive long enough to choose your own chain, he said, or to break it. Heir gave a low whistle, bold words for a healer. Sevrix looked at him, calm as winter. You should leave. Heir's eyes narrowed, then he shrugged and slipped away, closing the door behind him. Vayrelis sat alone with Sevrix's warning and the weight of the medallion. Her palm throbbed, her cheek hurt, her wrists burned, and beneath all of it something deeper stirred, something that had snapped a beast's neck without hesitation. He put the amulet on. The moment the stone touched her skin, a cool veil seemed to settle over her, muffling the sharp wrongness of her scent. The room felt less charged, as if a storm had moved a little farther away. But the mark still burned, and in the distance, faint through stone, Vayrelis thought she heard something answer. A low sound, not quite a howl, not quite a growl, like a creature in the dark turning its head toward her name. She closed her eyes, pressing the medallion to her chest. My brother is alive. The hope was a hook, and someone was pulling on it. When she opened her eyes, Sevrix was watching her with that same unsettling certainty. Tomorrow, he said, the Lunar Selection begins. Vayrelis's throat tightened. I will not survive it. Sevrix's voice was soft, almost kind. You might, he said, but not as the girl who woke up in a cage. He stepped toward the door, then paused as if deciding whether to give her one last blade of truth. The Regent will summon you, Sevrix said. When he does, remember this. Morwayn does not offer bargains. He offers traps that look like mercy. Then he left, and the lock turned again from the outside. Vayrelis sat in the silver silence, listening to her own heartbeat, trying not to imagine the hall full of alphas waiting to test her obedience, will, and blood. Trying not to imagine Kaiiltar's breath on her scent again, the moment his control slipped, the heat that flared in her body even as fear screamed at her to run. Trying not to imagine her brother in the Regent's hands. On the mirror, the map had faded, leaving only a faint smear like a wound that had stopped bleeding but never healed. Vayrelis pressed her marked palm against the glass. The burn flared, and for a heartbeat she saw not her own reflection, but a shadow behind her, tall and horned, eyes like an eclipse. She spun. Nothing. Only the locked door and the soft, relentless pulse of the palace around her, like it was breathing her in. Stand straight. If you tremble, they will taste it. Vayrelis lifted her chin, even though her knees threatened to betray her. The great hall was brighter than daylight, all silver banners and polished stone, and yet it felt like a pit. Dozens of alphas were arranged in a wide circle, shoulder to shoulder, leaving an empty ring at the center like an arena. Their eyes tracked her the way predators track a heartbeat. Omegas, Lady Kamara called, her voice sweet enough to rot teeth. Today you prove you can be held without breaking and shaped without shattering. Vayrelis stood among the other candidates, dressed in pale fabric that looked innocent until you felt how thin it was. Some girls stared at the floor. Some tried to smile. One was already crying silently, as if her body knew what her mind refused to accept. Kamara's gaze slid to Vayrelis and lingered, pleased. First trial, obedience. Walk the circle. Do not falter under alpha pressure. A murmur rippled through the court. Spectators crowded balconies. Servants lingered too long near doorways, pretending to dust what was already clean. And above it all, in the place where the throne watched even when it was empty, Archon Morwayn sat with his hands folded, wearing the mild smile of a man who enjoyed watching a trap close. Kaiiltar stood to the side, stiff as a blade. He did not look at Vayrelis, not directly, but she felt him all the same. His presence was a warning and a shield, and it made her furious that she wanted it. The amulet Sevrix had given her rested against her collarbone, cool as river stone. It muted her scent, dulled the wrongness, wrapped it in something close to ordinary. Close was not enough. Kamara lifted her hand. Begin. The first Omega stepped forward. She walked into the circle and instantly flinched, shoulders curling inward as the alphas leaned their attention toward her like a physical thing. Her steps faltered. She swallowed a sob and forced herself onward. Second, third, each one walked like they were crossing a storm. Then Kamara's eyes returned to Vayrelis. You, the replacement, show the hall what the throne chose. Heat crawled up Vayrelis's throat. She wanted to scream that she had not been chosen. She wanted to tear off the thin, pale dress and run barefoot into the streets, to vanish into the kind of shadows that did not ask for obedience. Instead, she stepped forward. The instant she crossed into the circle, every alpha in the ring shifted. It was subtle at first, a tightening of shoulders, an intake of breath. Nostrils flared, eyes sharpened. Their bodies responded before their minds did. The amulet pulsed once, cold to burning, as if it were straining to hold back a flood. Vayrelis put one foot in front of the other. Her mark throbbed in her palm, hidden but alive. Her skin felt too tight. Her heartbeat felt loud enough to echo. She lifted her gaze and met the eyes of the nearest alpha. His expression changed, confusion turning to hunger, then to something like awe. His lips parted. Vayrelis kept walking. The pressure in the circle intensified, not because they were pushing her down, but because they were trying to understand why they were not pushing her down. It was like walking into a room full of dogs and realizing you were the one holding the leash. A whisper slid through the hall like a blade through silk. She smells wrong. No, she smells like what Vayrelis thought wildly. Like danger, like night. Like something ancient that should not be wearing an Omega's skin. The alpha she had looked at suddenly swayed. Then he dropped to one knee. The sound of it cracked through the hall. A gasp followed, then a wave of stunned silence. He stared up at Vayrelis with wide eyes, as if he had heard a command spoken directly into his bones. Vayrelis froze, horrified. She had not touched him. She had not spoken. She had only existed. More alphas shifted, faces tightening with the effort of control. A few took a half step back without realizing it, like men backing away from a cliff edge. The amulet burned against her chest. Something inside her pressed outward, hungry for air. Kaiiltar's smile faltered for the first time, just a hairline crack. Morwen's smile deepened. Kaiiltar moved. He stepped into the circle with the authority of a storm. "Pause the trial," he said, voice sharp. "Technical interruption." Kaiiltar turned toward him, her eyes narrowing. "Heir Kaiiltar, you do not interrupt sacred trial." "I just did." A murmur rose, louder. Spectators leaned forward. Vayrelis stood in the center of the ring, every breath feeling borrowed. The kneeling alpha still did not rise. Kaiiltar's gaze flicked over the alphas, a warning to keep their control. Then his eyes found Vayrelis. "Do not move," his look said. "Do not let them see you panic." Vayrelis swallowed hard and forced her hands to unclench. Kaiiltar's voice cut clean. "Return the candidates to their waiting chambers. Now." Servants hurried forward. Guards guided the Omegas out. Vayrelis walked as if her legs were made of glass. She could still feel the ring of alphas behind her, like teeth at her back. As she passed Morwen's dais, his eyes met hers. He offered her a small nod, almost respectful, as if she had performed precisely as he expected. That was what terrified her most. In the corridor beyond, Kaiiltar caught up to her and seized her elbow. His touch was firm, controlled, but it sent a jolt through her skin that had nothing to do with fear. His scent hit her, clean and cold, like winter air through pine. The amulet tried to smother her response and failed. "Easy," he said under his breath. "Breathe." "I did nothing," Vayrelis hissed. "I know." His jaw tightened. "They do not care." She yanked her arm free. "Then why am I here?" Kaiiltar's eyes flicked to the guards nearby, then back to her. "Because you are the only piece on the board no one can predict, and Morwen hates unpredictability." As if summoned by his name, a messenger approached and bowed. "Heir, Archon Morwen requests the Omega's presence. Immediately." Vayrelis went cold. "No." The messenger did not react. He simply waited. Kaiiltar stepped between them. "She will come when I decide." The messenger smiled thinly. "Archon says she will come now, or her brother will be reminded what disobedience costs." Vayrelis's vision narrowed. "My brother is alive." The messenger's smile widened. "Alive is a flexible word." Kaiiltar's hand flexed at his side like he wanted to reach for a blade. Then he exhaled, forcing himself into stillness. He looked at Vayrelis. "Do not speak more than you must," he said. "Do not accept anything he offers, and do not let him see you bleed." "I am not afraid," Vayrelis lied. Kaiiltar's gaze held hers a beat too long. Something unspoken passed between them, a thread pulled taut. Then he stepped aside. Vayrelis followed the messenger through a narrower wing of the palace, where the walls were older and the torchlight dimmer. The air smelled faintly of ink and herbs, like a room where secrets were written and bodies were mended after. They reached a door guarded by two men in regent colors. It opened before she touched it. Morwayne's office was warm, lined with shelves of scrolls and jars. A fire burned low in a hearth. It felt almost welcoming, which made the place feel wrong. Morwayne rose from behind a desk. "Vayrelis," he said gently, as if he were greeting an honored guest. "How pleasing to finally speak privately." Vayrelis kept her spine straight. "Where is my brother?" Morwayne spread his hands. "Always the same first question. Loyalty is such a charming flaw." "Answer." Morwayne's gaze dropped to the amulet at her throat, then back to her face. "You are wearing Sevrix's little stone," he observed. "Clever, temporary." Vayrelis did not move. "Where is he?" Morwayne walked around the desk slowly, as if taking in a painting. "You want proof?" He reached into his robe and drew out a ring. Vayrelis's chest constricted. The ring was plain silver, worn thin at the edges, and she knew it like she knew her own scars. Her brother had stolen it once as a joke, worn it on a chain, then swore he would return it when they were safe. Morwayne slid it onto his own finger. "I keep what I own," he said, voice soft. "Your brother serves me now." Vayrelis's hands curled into fists so hard her nails cut her skin. "He would never." Morwayne tilted his head. "Never is a child's word." He was offered a choice. Obey and you live, resist, and you die slowly enough to regret it. Vayrelis felt her mark throb in her palm, a pulse of heat that begged to become violence. Morwayne watched her like a man watching a kettle begin to sing. "Now," he said, "I will offer you a choice as well." Vayrelis forced her voice steady. "I will not serve you." "You will," Morwayne said simply, "because you want your brother, and because you want to survive." He moved closer until the air between them felt thin. "Become my symbol," he murmured. "Let the court believe you are the moon's chosen Omega. Smile, bow when commanded, marry when ordered. In exchange, I return your brother to you." Vayrelis's stomach turned. "You want me to be a puppet?" Morwayne smiled with something like pity. "No, Vayrelis, I want you to be a banner. Banners do not speak, they only inspire." She stared at the ring on his finger, the proof of her brother's captivity gleaming like a wound. Every instinct screamed to attack him, to tear the ring off his hand, to sink her teeth into his throat. And yet the room was full of unseen guards. Wards hummed faintly in the air. Morwayne's calm did not come from bravery. It came from certainty. Vayrelis swallowed her rage like poison. "If I agree," she said carefully, "I want to see him first." Morwayne's smile did not change. "You will see him when you have proven obedience." "Then I will prove it," Vayrelis lied. She bowed her head just enough to satisfy him, not enough to break herself. Morwayne's eyes gleamed. "Good girl." The words made her skin crawl. As she turned to leave, Morwayne added, almost casually, "And Vayrelis. Tell Sevrix that if he continues to meddle, I will have him assigned to plague wards until his calm finally cracks." Vayrelis paused, then walked out without answering. Her legs carried her through the corridor like she was floating, because if she allowed herself to feel her own weight, she might collapse. In a side passage near a tapestry of a wolf under a crescent moon, a hand caught her wrist and pulled her into shadow. Tyern. His knife smile was gone. His face was drawn tight, eyes too bright. "He spoke to you," he said quietly. Vayrelis yanked her arm free. "He has my brother." Tyrn's gaze flicked around, checking for spies. "Morwayne shows you what he wants you to see." "He showed me the ring," Tyrn exhaled. "Then he wants you to believe your brother is already his." Vayrelis grabbed Tyrn by the front of his tunic and slammed him back against the stone. "Stop speaking in riddles," she hissed. "You told me he was alive. If you lied, I will break your throat." Tyrn's throat bobbed, but he did not fight her grip. His voice came out low. "I did not lie. He is alive, but he is not free." "Like you," Vayrelis said, eyes narrowing. Tyrn's expression tightened. Then, slowly, he pulled his collar aside and lifted the edge of his shirt. For a heartbeat, Vayrelis saw the line of his ribs. Then she saw the brand. A sigil burned into his skin, faint but unmistakable, like a seal pressed into flesh. It looked old and new at once, healed and still angry. "If I betray Morwine," Tyron said, "I die." Vayrelis's grip loosened. "What is that?" "A leash," Tyron whispered. "A promise carved into my heart. I work for him because I have to, but I want out of this game." Vayrelis's chest ached with the sudden realization that no one in this palace was unchained. Not her, not Tyron, not even Kaiiltar. "Why tell me?" she asked. Tyrion's eyes held hers. "Because you are the first thing I have seen in years that Morwine did not fully control. And because when you walked that circle today, I felt something snap in the air." He swallowed. "You scare me." "Good," Vayrelis said, and hated how her voice shook. "Then help me." Tyron leaned closer. "Kaiiltar will take you to the moon pool tonight. He thinks it is private. It is not. Morwine listens everywhere." Tyron's lips twitched bitterly. "If you speak there, choose your words like you choose knives." Vayrelis stared at him. "You are warning me and threatening me in the same breath." "That is who I am," Tyron said softly. "A man made of mixed loyalties." He stepped back into the corridor's light, then paused. "One more thing. Do not let Kamara corner you alone. Her sweetness is a mouth." Before Vayrelis could ask what that meant, he vanished like he had never been there. That night, as the palace quieted into its false sleep, guards escorted Vayrelis through a locked wing to a door of carved moonstone. Kaiiltar stood waiting on the other side. He dismissed the guards with a look. The door shut. Silence fell like snow. The room beyond was circular, its ceiling painted with phases of the moon. At its center lay a pool, perfectly still, reflecting the moonlight that poured through an opening above. The air smelled of cold water and faint incense. Kaiiltar watched Vayrelis as if searching for cracks in her composure. "You spoke to Morwine," he said. "Yes." "What did he offer?" "A leash," Vayrelis said, "with my brother's life tied to it." Kaiiltar's jaw tightened. He stepped closer to the pool, gaze fixed on the water as if it could swallow his anger. "He uses family as rope." Vayrelis's throat burned. "Then you know what he is." Kaiiltar's voice turned hard. "I know." She took a step closer. The amulet still cooled her throat, still muffled her scent, but in this quiet room every breath felt intimate. "Kaiiltar," she said, forcing herself to say his name like a challenge, "tell me the truth. Do you want me, or do you want the throne?" His eyes flicked to her sharp. For a heartbeat, his control wavered, not from lust, but from something like exhaustion. Then he answered, and his honesty landed like a stone. "First, safety," he said. "For you, for me, for the line. After that, I do not know." Vayrelis's chest tightened. "That is not an answer. It is the only honest one." He moved closer, slow. "If you crumble, they will destroy you and call it justice. If you fight openly, they will destroy you and call it necessity. I am trying to carve a third path." "And what is the price?" Vayrelis whispered. Kaiiltar's gaze dropped to her throat, to the amulet. "The price is that you stop trying to run alone." Vayrelis laughed once, bitter. "You say that like I have a choice." He stepped into her space, close enough that she felt the heat of him. His scent slid past the amulet's veil, brushing her skin. It made her stomach twist with unwanted want. "You have choices," Kaiiltar said, voice low. "Not good ones, but choices." Vayrelis lifted her marked hands slightly, hiding the palm. "If I break, you will let them kill me." Kaiiltar's eyes flashed. "No." The word came out too fast, too raw. It startled them both. Vayrelis stared up at him, heart hammering. "Why?" Kaiiltar's gaze held hers, and for a moment he looked less like an heir and more like a man who had been forced into armor too young. "Because I know what it is to be used," he said quietly. "And because when I breathed you in, my body recognized something it should not." The confession sent a shiver through her. The memory of his control slipping, of the crowd's hunger, of her own skin responding. Vayrelis swallowed. "Then help me get my brother back." Kaiiltar's mouth tightened. "I will try." "You will," she corrected, "not try." Kaiiltar stared at her for a long beat, Then he nodded once. "Then you will live through the next trial." "What is it?" Vayrelis asked. Kaiiltar's gaze turned toward the painted moon phases. "The forest of skins," he said, "a night alone where the dead whisper and the living lie." Vayrelis felt a chill slide down her spine. Kaiiltar reached out, and for a heartbeat his fingers hovered near her cheek, near the bruise left by the shifter guard's strike earlier. He did not touch. He pulled back as if contact would be too dangerous. "Do not follow voices," he said. Vayrelis's laugh was thin. "What if the voice is my brother?" Kaiiltar's eyes darkened. Especially then. The next night, the candidates were taken beyond the palace walls. Torches bobbed in a line through black trees. The forest smelled of damp earth and old magic. The air felt thick, charged, like a storm waiting to break. Kamara walked among them, white cloak trailing like a priestess's veil. She stopped in front of Vayrelis and leaned close, her perfume sweet and suffocating. "If you do not return," Kamara whispered, "it becomes simpler for me." Vayrelis met her eyes. "That a blessing or a threat?" Kamara smiled. "Both." A bell rang. Guards pushed the candidates into the tree line, separating them, forcing them into darkness alone. Vayrelis moved carefully, listening. Her amulet pulsed faintly as if protesting the forest's magic. Every so often she caught a sound that might have been a footstep and might have been a whisper. The first voice came from behind her. "Vay," her breath caught. Her brother used to shorten her name like that when he was trying to make her laugh. She spun, darkness, trees, no one. Then the voice again, closer, urgent. "This way, hurry." Vayrelis's heart slammed against her ribs. Logic screamed that it was a trap. Grief screamed that it was hope. She moved. Branches snagged her dress. Roots clawed at her feet. She pushed through undergrowth until she reached a clearing. In the center lay a circle of bones, arranged with ritual precision, etched with runes that glowed faintly. The air inside the ring felt different, heavier, like stepping into water. Vayrelis stopped at the edge. Her mark burned. Not pain, recognition. A shape unfolded from the shadows beyond the circle. It was massive, taller than any wolf, shoulders broad and wrong, its body a blend of beast and nightmare. Its eyes were not yellow or green. They were like an eclipse, darkness swallowing light, rimmed with faint silver. The Noct beast. Vayrelis's body went still. Fear rose, but underneath it something stranger stirred, like a memory from before memory. The creature did not attack. It stepped closer, head lowering. Then it bowed, not to submit, to acknowledge. Vayrelis's throat tightened. "You know me." The Noct beast's breath fogged in the cold air, and the sound it made was not a growl. It was almost a purr, deep and vibrating through the ground. Something shifted behind her. A soft note, a single tone that threaded through the clearing. Orander stepped into view, his eyes bright with intent. "There you are," he murmured. "You always move toward the forbidden." Vayrelis's stomach dropped. "You led me." Orander smiled. "I followed the pull. Your mark is a lighthouse." He began to sing. The sound slid into the clearing like silk. The runes on the bones flared brighter. The Noct beast's muscles tensed, its head jerking as if yanked by invisible chains. Vayrelis felt the song brush her thoughts, too, trying to slide between her ribs and pluck her emotions like strings. "No," she snapped, forcing her mind hard. She reached for the vial Sevrix had slipped her earlier, still tucked in her sleeve, and clenched it like a talisman. Orander's song sharpened, notes turning into hooks. "Sleep," he sang softly. "Kneel, return to cage." The Noct beast shuddered, claws digging into earth. It snarled, a sound that shook leaves loose from branches. Then Orander's voice cracked. Mid-note, his throat seized. His eyes widened, pupils flaring. The song twisted into something older, uglier, and the words that came out were not his. "Return to the cage, child," the voice said through him. "You were made to open what should remain shut." Vayrelis's skin went cold. The ancient voice felt like deep water closing over her head. Orander's body convulsed. The bones' runes flared again, and the Noct beast took a half step backward as if struck. Vayrelis looked at the circle of bones. A trap, not for her, for him. She lunged forward, stepping into the ring. Pain flared up her legs, like frost-biting skin. The runes reacted to her, pulsing, hungry. Her mark in her palm ignited, heat blasting outward. She slammed her marked palm onto the nearest bone. The runes seared her skin, and she hissed. Then the bone cracked. The light flickered. The Noct beast snarled again, this time with sudden freedom. Vayrelis moved fast, tearing at the circle, kicking bones aside, dragging them out of alignment. The runes sputtered like dying embers. The ancient voice screamed through Orinder, warped with rage. The forest answered with a moan like wind through graves. Vayrelis shattered the last piece of the circle. The magic snapped. The Noct beast surged forward, not attacking Vayrelis, but pressing close, its huge head near her shoulder, breathing her in as if savoring a scent it had been starved of. The amulet at her throat heated, protesting. Orinder collapsed to his knees, gasping, eyes rolling. The ancient voice vanished as abruptly as a candle blown out. Vayrelis stumbled back, chest heaving. Her hand burned. Not just the old mark. A new sensation crawled along her skin like ink sinking into flesh. She looked down and saw it forming on her forearm just above her wrist. A second mark, not lunar. Shadowed, edged with silver, shaped like a claw over a crescent. Vayrelis's breath caught. What did I do? The Noct beast huffed, almost gently, and nudged her arm with its muzzle, as if claiming the new mark the way the throne claimed the old one. Orinder groaned and tipped sideways, unconscious. Vayrelis looked at him, then at the trees beyond. If she stayed, Morwen's people would come. If she fled alone, the forest would swallow her. She grabbed Orinder under the arms and hauled him up. He was heavier than he looked, all lean muscle and dead weight. She dragged him through brush, every step tearing at her lungs. Whispers followed her, not her brother's voice now. Other voices, some weeping, some laughing, some promising comfort, some promising knives. Vayrelis did not answer any of them. At last she saw torchlight through trees, the forest edge. Relief rose, then died. Men waited there, not palace guards, but Morwen's private hounds, faces hard, eyes glittering with purpose. Their leader stepped forward, blade in hand. "Omega," he said, "Archon requests you return." Vayrelis tightened her grip on Orinder. "Tell him no," the leader smiled. "We were told you might say that." They advanced. Vayrelis backed up, trying to shield Orinder. Her amulet pulsed, weakening, the forest magic eating at its concealment. She felt her wrong scent slip out in thin threads, like smoke through cracks. One man inhaled and his expression shifted, hunger and fear mixing. "What is she?" Before he could step closer, a figure dropped from the trees behind them, moving like a blade thrown by darkness. Tyern. He slammed into the leader, knocking him off balance, and drove an elbow into his throat. The leader stumbled back, coughing. Tyern flashed Vayrelis a grim smile. "Run," he snapped. Vayrelis stared. "You will die." "Maybe," Tyern said, and his eyes were bright with something like relief. "At least it will be my choice." Two guards lunged at him. Tyern moved fast, too fast, spinning, striking, using their momentum against them. He fought like a man trained to kill quietly. Vayrelis dragged Orinder toward the trees, then stopped when she saw a guard peel away from the fight and charge straight at her, blade raised. No room to dodge. Orinder's weight pinned her. The blade swung down. Tyern moved between them. The blade sank into Tyrn's side with a wet sound. Vayrelis's scream tore out of her before she could stop it. The guard yanked the blade free, preparing to strike again. Tyern grabbed the guard's wrist and twisted. Bone cracked. The guard howled. Then Tyrn's blood spilled down his tunic, and in the torchlight it glimmered. Not red. Silver, luminous, as if moonlight had been liquefied inside him. The guards froze, shock flashing across their faces. Vayrelis stared, breath trapped. Tyern swayed, teeth clenched. "Do not look at me like that," he rasped. "I told you I was leashed." He shoved the guard away and staggered backward, blood still glowing. A horn sounded, sharp and commanding. Kaiiltar appeared at the forest edge with palace guards behind him, sword drawn, eyes cold. He moved like he had known exactly where to come. Vayrelis' suspicion flared. How did he arrive so fast? Who had told him, or who had been watching her? Kaiiltar's gaze swept the scene and landed on Vayrelis, then on Orinder in her grasp, then on Tyern bleeding silver. For a heartbeat his mask slipped. Then discipline slammed back into place. Enough, Kaiiltar snapped. His guards surged forward, surrounding Morwhain's men. Steel flashed. Morwhain's hounds retreated, not defeated but delayed, melting back into the trees like they had never been there. Kaiiltar strode to Vayrelis. His eyes flicked to her forearm where the shadow mark curled, visible now. Something tightened in his face. "What happened?" he demanded. Vayrelis swallowed. "The Noct beast," she said. "It bowed to me. Orinder tried to bind it. Something spoke through him." Kaiiltar's grip tightened on his sword. "Morwhain, I do not know," Vayrelis whispered, "but the forest wrote a new mark on me." Kaiiltar's gaze dropped to the amulet at her throat. "Your concealment is failing." Vayrelis' chest tightened. "I felt it." Kaiiltar stepped closer and, without touching her, leaned in to breathe. He stopped himself at the last moment, jaw locking, as if even the act of inhaling her too deeply might shatter him. His voice turned rough. "You smell like a storm that learned to wear skin." Vayrelis' breath caught, heat blooming in her belly despite terror. "Do not say things like that." Kaiiltar's eyes lifted to hers. "I cannot afford to lie to you," he said. "Not now." He turned sharply. "Bring Orinder," he ordered his guards. "And get Tyern to Sevrix." "Now." Tyern tried to wave them off. "I can walk." Kaiiltar's gaze cut to him. "You are leaking moonlight. Shut up and live." They returned to the palace through side gates, avoiding the main halls. Sevrix met them in a dim corridor, his calm cracking only slightly when he saw Tyrn's wound. He caught Tyern as he stumbled and guided him into a small chamber that smelled of herbs and sharp alcohol. Vayrelis followed before anyone could stop her. Sevrix pressed his fingers to Tyrn's side, eyes narrowed. "This is not ordinary blood," he murmured, more to himself than anyone. Tyrn's lips twisted. "No one in this palace is ordinary." Sevrix's gaze flicked to Vayrelis' forearm. "You gained a second mark." Vayrelis' throat tightened. "It burned itself into me." Sevrix exhaled slowly. "Then the ritual is accelerating." "What ritual?" Vayrelis demanded. Sevrix did not answer yet. He focused on Tyern, slicing fabric away, revealing the wound. The silver blood pulsed like living light. Sevrix's hands were steady, precise. He pressed something black and bitter smelling into the wound, and the silver light dimmed slightly, as if forced into obedience. Tyern hissed, "That hurts." Sevrix glanced up, eyes flat. "Good. It means you are alive." He leaned closer to Vayrelis without looking away from his work. "His heart is a seal," Sevrix said quietly. Morwhain stitched magic into him. "It can be torn out, but it will not be gentle." Tyern laughed weakly. "There is a surprise." Vayrelis' hands shook. "Why would Morwhain do that?" Sevrix's mouth tightened. "Because he likes to own his tools from the inside." A knock hit the door, a guard's voice. "Heir requests the Omega." Sevrix stood, wiping his hands. "Go," he told Vayrelis, "and do not let them push you into the third trial unprepared." "What is the third?" Vayrelis asked, dread thick in her mouth. Sevrix's gaze held hers. "The Lunar Oath," he said. "At the throne, you will be made to speak a name." Vayrelis went cold. "Kaiiltar." Sevrix did not deny it. He simply added, "If you speak it, you may survive. If you refuse, you may die. If you speak another, the palace itself may answer." Vayrelis' mark throbbed, as if amused by the idea of the palace answering. She found Kaiiltar in a narrow hall lined with old portraits. Each painted face looked like it had died with secrets clenched in its teeth. Kaiiltar turned as she approached. His eyes swept her forearm, then her face. "You went into the forest and came back marked twice," he said, And you dragged Orinder out like he was your burden to carry. Vayrelis swallowed. I could not leave him. Kaiiltar's gaze sharpened. Why? Vayrelis's voice came out raw. Because I know what it is to be left. Something flickered in Kaiiltar's expression, then vanished. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. The court will not like a second mark. Kamara will call it corruption. Morwen will call it proof. Proof of what? Vayrelis asked. Kaiiltar's jaw tightened. That you are the key to the Noct beast, and that the palace is waking. Vayrelis's breath caught. Sevrek said something about a ritual. Kaiiltar's gaze turned distant for a heartbeat, like he was remembering a story he hated. There are old rites, he said, rites meant to bind Omegas more tightly than chains, to rewrite them until they fit the will of the throne. Vayrelis's blood ran cold. Rewrite? Orinder said I was rewritten. Kaiiltar's eyes met hers. Yes. The hallway felt suddenly too small. A bell rang, 3 slow chimes heavy as a funeral. Kaiiltar's face hardened. The third trial begins. They entered the throne hall. It had been rearranged. Candles burned in tall stands, their flames pale and steady, as if fed by something other than wax. The Lunar Throne loomed at the far end, empty but not silent. The air around it vibrated faintly, like a low note held too long. Candidates stood in a line before the dais. Court nobles packed the sides. Alphas watched with hungry stillness. Kamara stood near the steps, radiant, a saint carved from snow. Morwen sat slightly to the side, hands folded, his ring glinting. Vayrelis's stomach clenched at the sight. Kaiiltar stayed behind her line, close enough that she felt him like a shadow at her back. Kamara lifted her hands. Third trial, lunar oath. Her eyes glittered. An Omega must speak the name of the one she belongs to. The throne will hear, the moon will judge. A low murmur rose. One by one, candidates stepped forward, trembling, voices cracking as they offered names. Some spoke Kaiiltar's name with desperate hope. Others spoke names of lesser alphas, bargaining for survival. When Vayrelis's turn came, the hall seemed to inhale. She walked toward the throne with her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break her ribs. With each step, the amulet at her throat grew warmer, like it was failing. Wrong scent threaded into the air. Alphas shifted. A few swallowed hard. One gripped the edge of a column as if steadying himself. Vayrelis reached the foot of the dais. Kamara's voice turned soft, coaxing. Speak, belong, be safe. Vayrelis lifted her head and looked at the empty throne, her marks pulsed. In her mind, a whisper rose, not in words but in sensation. Break the cage. Vayrelis's throat tightened. Behind her, she felt Kaiiltar step closer, his presence steady, a hand offered without touching. Say my name, his silence seemed to plead. Survive. Before Vayrelis could speak, something crashed down from above. A body hit the stone floor with a sickening thud, rolling near the dais steps. A cloak sprawled around it. Vayrelis recognized the cloak instantly. She had stitched the torn hem herself, late at night by candle stub, cursing her brother for ripping it again. Her brother's cloak. A scream ripped through the hall. Nobles recoiled. Guards surged forward. Vayrelis's vision tunneled. She stumbled down the steps and fell to her knees beside the body, hands shaking as she pushed the cloak aside. The face underneath was pale, lips blue, eyes open and empty. For one heartbeat, Vayrelis's world shattered. Then she saw it. The skin near the jawline rippled faintly, like wax under heat. The cheekbone looked wrong, too smooth. The eyes were the right color, but dead in a way her brother's eyes never were, even when he was exhausted and afraid. Illusion. A mask made of magic and flesh. Vayrelis's breath came in a harsh sob that turned into rage. She looked up at Morwen. Morwen met her gaze calmly, as if he had dropped a prop onto a stage. You see, he said to the hall, voice gentle, disobedience kills. Vayrelis stood, swaying, and raised her voice so it would carry. It is not him, she shouted. This is a fake, an illusion stitched onto a corpse. The hall erupted in noise, shock, and disbelief mixing with hunger for spectacle. Kamara's expression tightened. eyes flashing. Omegas do not accuse the regent, Chimera hissed. Vayrelis turned toward her, shaking with fury. Omegas do not breathe wrong either, she snapped. And yet here I am. The amulet at her throat flared hot, then went suddenly cold as if it had given up. Vayrelis felt her scent explode outward, not sweet, not submissive. It hit the hall like a wave of night air laced with lightning. Alphas froze, some staggered backward. One nobleman dropped his goblet. Another alpha's knees bent as if pressed down by an invisible hand. Silence slammed into the room. In that silence, the throne hummed. Vayrelis felt the hum in her bones, responding to her marks like a lock recognizing its key. Morwen rose slowly, his smile finally showing teeth. There, he said softly, the anomaly reveals herself. He lifted his hand. Seize her, alive. Guards surged forward. Chimera's voice cut through. Do not damage her, she snapped. She is still needed. Vayrelis backed away, heart pounding. She looked over her shoulder at Kaiiltar. This was the moment, she realized. The moment he would choose. Kaiiltar stepped forward. He moved to stand beside her. The hall gasped. Morwen's eyebrows lifted, almost amused. Heir Kaiiltar, he said, voice mild. Do not be foolish. Kaiiltar's sword slid from its sheath with a clean, final sound. Touch her, he said, and you will bleed. Chimera's face tightened with fury. You would commit treason for an Omega. Kaiiltar's gaze did not waver. I would commit truth for a lie that wears a crown. Morwen's smile widened. Then you choose her over the throne. Kaiiltar's voice was cold. I choose what keeps the realm from rotting. Morwen's hand lifted slightly. The guards attacked. It was not a battle announced by trumpets. It was a massacre conducted in whispers, blades sliding between ribs under the cover of chaos. Nobles screamed. Omegas scattered. Alphas roared, some trying to protect, others trying to claim. Kaiiltar grabbed Vayrelis' wrist and dragged her toward a side passage. His grip was iron. His body moved with lethal precision, cutting down anyone who blocked their path. Vayrelis stumbled, breath ragged, her scent still flaring. It made men hesitate, made them hungry and afraid at once, and she hated that it was useful. They slammed through a hidden door into a narrow corridor. Sevrix appeared ahead, as if he had been waiting, his calm now sharpened into urgency. Tyron staggered beside him, pale but upright, tunic stained with silver-dark blood. Orinder was with them too, wrists bound in rune cord, eyes wide and haunted. I woke, Orinder rasped, and something woke with me. Sevrix shoved a bundle into Kaiiltar's hands. Maps, keys, if you want to live, you go down, not up. Vayrelis' voice shook. My brother. Sevrix's gaze flicked to her sharp. Alive, still. Morwen keeps him for the end. He needs a blade to your throat that you cannot ignore. Orinder's breathing hitched. It spoke through me, he whispered. Old, hungry. It told me to bring her back to the cage. Vayrelis stared at him. What is inside you? Orinder's eyes glistened with fear. A voice, he said. Not mine, bind me tighter. Kaiiltar nodded once, and Sevrix tightened the rune cord around Orinder's wrists, adding a second loop around his throat like a collar. Orinder flinched but did not protest. Tyron leaned against the wall, jaw clenched. Morwen will lock the palace. As if to confirm his words, iron gates crashed somewhere above, the sound echoing down the passages. A horn sounded, then another. Morwen's voice boomed faintly through the palace, amplified by magic. Bring me the marked Omega alive. Kill anyone who shelters her. Vayrelis' stomach clenched. Kaiiltar looked at the small group, then at Vayrelis. We move, now. They plunged into the underways, corridors that smelled of old stone and older secrets. Torchlight flickered. Footsteps thundered behind them, distant but closing. As they ran, Sevrix spoke low to Vayrelis, words clipped by urgency. Your first mark, the lunar one, it is not a blessing. It is part of a ritual called rebinding, a way to rewrite an Omega so her bond answers the will of whoever holds the throne. Vayrelis' throat went tight. They did that to me, Sevrix nodded once. They tried. Something in you resisted. That is why your scent is wrong. That is why alphas react like they are hearing a command they cannot name. Vayrelis's hands shook. Then what is the second mark? Sevrix's eyes flicked to her forearm. The forest answered you. The Noct answered you. That mark is not theirs. It is older. Orinder stumbled, then caught himself, voice strained. It wants her, he whispered. It wants the cage open. Tyron shot Orinder a sharp look. If the thing inside you speaks again, I will cut your throat myself. Orinder swallowed hard. Do it. Better death than being its mouth. They reached a stair spiraling downward beneath the palace's heart. At its base stood a door carved with lunar symbols, worn by time. Tyron pressed a hand to it, then shook his head. Locked. Kaiiltar pulled the bundle of keys Sevrix had given him and tried one. The lock clicked. They entered a small chapel under the throne. The air inside was cold and still, heavy with old reverence. A single broken candle sat on an altar. The walls were covered in faded frescoes. Vayrelis stepped forward, drawn despite herself. In the center of one wall, painted in ancient pigment, an Omega stood with her arms outstretched. 2 marks glowed on her skin, one lunar, one shadow. At her feet, a beast with moonlit horns knelt, chained not by iron but by a ribbon of light. Vayrelis stared as her breath left her. The Omega's face was her face. No, she whispered. That is not possible. Kaiiltar's voice came out rough. This chapel is older than my line. Sevrix's gaze was grim. Then your existence is older than the story they tell. On the altar, beneath the fresco, lay a blade. It was long and pale, metal like moonlight frozen into shape. The hilt was wrapped in dark leather, worn by hands long dead. Sigils ran along the blade's length like veins. The lunar blade. Vayrelis felt it hum, a note in her bones answering the throne's distant vibration. Kaiiltar stepped in front of it instinctively. Do not touch. Vayrelis's eyes did not leave the blade. It is calling me. That is what scares me, Kaiiltar said. Footsteps thundered above. Voices echoed down the stairwell. They had been followed. Sevrix's calm snapped into sharp urgency. We do not have time. Vayrelis stepped around Kaiiltar before he could block her and reached for the blade. The instant her fingers wrapped the hilt, heat surged up her arm. Not burning, claiming. The blade brightened, a soft silver glow that filled the chapel like dawn. In Vayrelis's mind, a voice whispered, clear as her own thought. Break the cage. Vayrelis's breath hitched. She tightened her grip. Kaiiltar stared at the blade in her hands, then at her. It obeys you. Vayrelis's voice shook. I do not want to obey anything. Then use it, Tyron rasped, pushing away from the wall. Use it to get out. They fled the chapel through a narrow passage behind the altar, climbing into another corridor. Above, the palace roared with chaos. At a junction, Kaiiltar stepped out of shadow as if she had been poured from it. 2 guards stood behind her, but she did not need them. Her smile was calm, saintly, and her eyes were a predator-s. Vayrelis, she said warmly. You are running with dangerous men. Come with me, I can hide you. Vayrelis lifted the blade slightly. Hide me or own me. Kaiiltar's smile softened. Is there a difference? Kaiiltar's sword angled toward Kaiiltar. Move. Kaiiltar ignored him, gaze locked on Vayrelis. You will not survive under Kaiiltar's honor. Honor is a pretty cage. Under Morwen you will not survive at all. Under me, she murmured, stepping closer, you could be cherished. The word cherished sounded like a threat in her mouth. Vayrelis felt her wrong scent stir, reacting to Kaiiltar's presence like 2 predators circling. You do not cherish, Vayrelis said. You swallow. Kaiiltar's eyes flashed. Careful. Vayrelis's grip tightened on the lunar blade. Show me what you really are. Kaiiltar's smile widened, and then her body shifted. Not into a wolf. Her bones flowed, her spine lengthening in a smooth, terrible way. Scales rippled along her skin like spilled ink. Her eyes slit, pupils narrowing. Her jaw reshaped subtly, teeth sharpening. Serpentine, ancient, wrong in a different way than Vayrelis was wrong. Tyron swore under his breath. Kaiiltar's stance tightened, ready to strike. Kamara's voice remained sweet, even as her tongue flicked briefly against her teeth. "I can keep you alive," she whispered. "Be mine." Vayrelis' stomach turned. "No," she moved before doubt could poison her. The lunar blade sliced through the air in a clean arc, and the sound it made was not steel. It was a note, bright and cold. It cut Kamara's arm, shallow but real. Kamara hissed, recoil instant, eyes blazing with fury. "You dare." Vayrelis held the blade between them, breath ragged. "Yes." Kamara's expression sharpened into something cruel. "Then I will not need to catch you. I will let the palace catch you." She drew a small vial from her sleeve and shattered it against the stone. A scent erupted, invisible but immediate. It crawled into the corridor like a living net, sweet and suffocating, designed to cling to Vayrelis' wrongness and broadcast it. Sevrix's face tightened. "Scent net." Kaiiltar grabbed Vayrelis' arm. "Run." They ran. Behind them, Kamara's laugh echoed, bright as broken glass. The scent net chased them through halls, clinging to corners, seeping under doors, blooming in stairwells. Wherever they went, guards turned their heads as if pulled by a string. Alphas inhaled and their eyes darkened. The palace was becoming a lung, breathing her in. They burst into a service exit that led into the city. Night had fallen fully. The streets below were chaos, people shouting, running, pointing toward the palace towers. Somewhere in the distance, a howl rolled across rooftops, deep enough to rattle windows. The Noct beast. Panic broke in waves as citizens fled, convinced the end had come. Vayrelis staggered as the sound hit her body. Her marks pulsed in response. The lunar blade hummed. Sevrix grabbed her shoulder. "Do not let the city see what you are." Vayrelis laughed harshly. "I do not even know what I am." Another howl closer, and the air itself seemed to vibrate. Somewhere above, something heavy landed on stone. Kaiiltar looked up, eyes narrowing. Roof. They climbed a narrow stair to the palace roof, emerging into cold wind and moonlight. The city sprawled below, lights flickering like nervous fireflies. Across the rooftops, a shadow moved. The Noct beast leapt, landing on a neighboring roof with a sound like thunder. Its eclipse eyes fixed on Vayrelis. Behind it, guards gathered on lower roofs, hesitant, terrified, drawn by the scent net and repelled by the beast. Vayrelis stepped forward, wind whipping her hair. The net of scent still clung to her, broadcasting her to every hungry alpha in range. She could feel their attention like teeth. She lifted the lunar blade slightly, not threatening. Then she did something that felt insane. She called the Noct beast, not with words, but with the pull in her chest, with the marks burning like twin stars. The beast's head lowered. It came to her roof with a single leap. It landed and immediately bowed again, closer, its breath fogging around her legs. It nudged her hand where the blade was, then nudged her marked arm, as if confirming ownership and kin. Vayrelis' breath shook. "What do you want from me?" The beast pressed its forehead gently against her hip, a gesture almost intimate, almost protective. The contact snapped something inside her. Heat surged through her body, not desire, not fear, but transformation. Her bones sang with pain and power. The marks flared, lunar in shadow, and the blade in her hand vibrated like it was laughing. Kaiiltar reached toward her. "Vayrelis, stop." "I cannot," she gasped. Her skin rippled, her spine arched, the world tilted, and then she shifted, not into a wolf, into something that made the night itself feel smaller. Her body elongated, muscles reshaping with ruthless grace. Dark fur spread like spilled ink, edged with faint silver. Her senses exploded outward, hearing the frantic heartbeats of guards below, smelling fear like smoke. And from her skull, curved horns rose, moonlit at their edges, like crescent blades grown from bone. The city fell silent for a heartbeat, as if every living thing had stopped breathing. On the roof, Kaiiltar froze, eyes wide, and in his expression Vayrelis saw not disgust, not fear, but recognition so deep it looked like grief. Orinder, still bound, began to convulse. From his throat, a voice tore out, ancient and furious, vibrating through stone and air. "She returns," it snarled. The cage breaks. The moon bleeds. Vayrelis, half-beast, half-mind, turned her eclipse gaze toward Orinder. The ancient voice inside him strained against the rune cord like a parasite trying to be born. Sevrix stepped back, face pale, hands lifting as if to steady himself against an invisible wave. Below, Morwaine's voice rose through the city, carried by magic, calm and pleased. "Finally," he said, as if speaking to a lover in the dark. "The ritual has begun." The roof trembled under Vayrelis's claws. Wind cut across her fur and caught in the curve of her horns. Below, the city held its breath. Torches dotted streets like nervous fireflies. People stared upward as if the sky had grown teeth. In her chest, two rhythms fought for control. The lunar mark pulled like a chain toward the palace, toward the throne that hummed with possession. The shadow mark pulled outward, toward the dark beyond law, toward the beast that bowed as if it had been waiting for her longer than time. The Noct beast stood close, massive head lowered, Eclipse eyes fixed on her with something that felt like recognition and relief. Behind her, Kaiiltar's heartbeat sounded loud in her sharpened hearing. Sevrix's breathing stayed steady, but his scent had turned sharp with calculation. Tyrn leaned against a chimney stack, bleeding less now, but still pale. Orinder convulsed on his knees, rune cord biting into his throat, as if it were the only thing keeping a second mouth from opening in his skin. Then Morwaine's voice rose again, calm as a lullaby. "Finally, the ritual has begun." A ripple moved through the air as if the voice itself had fingers. Vayrelis felt the lunar mark answer. Heat flared in her palm, then surged up her arm like molten light. Pain snapped her spine straight. Her claws scraped stone. The Noct beast snarled, stepping between her and the palace towers, but the pain was inside her, not in the air. Sevrix moved fast, grabbing Vayrelis's forearm with both hands. His touch was cool and grounded even through her fur. "He is pulling through the lunar mark," he said, voice clipped. "He is not just speaking, he is holding the chain." Vayrelis tried to speak, but her throat gave a sound that was half growl, half gasp. Kaiiltar stepped closer, sword drawn, face lifted into the wind like he was offering his throat to a storm. "Morwaine," he shouted toward the palace. "Show yourself." A soft laugh drifted back, not from one direction, but from all of them at once. A figure formed on the far side of the roof, as if painted into the night, and then peeled free. Archon Morwaine stood there in his dark robes, hands folded, hair barely disturbed by wind. His smile was gentle. Two guards flanked him, masks on their faces and moon iron chains in their hands. And between them, stumbling as if half asleep, was a young man with his hands bound. Vayrelis's world narrowed to a single point: her brother. His hair was tangled. His cheek was bruised. His eyes looked unfocused, but he was breathing. Alive, real. He lifted his head, and the moment his gaze found her, something inside him snapped awake. His eyes widened in shock, then filled with fierce, ragged relief. He tried to speak, but one of Morwaine's guards jerked the chain and forced him to his knees. Morwaine's voice stayed soft. "There," he said, as if offering a gift. "Proof." Vayrelis's claws bit into stone. She took one step forward. Kaiiltar caught her shoulder, careful despite the danger of touching her now. "Wait," he said under his breath. "He wants you to charge." Vayrelis's lips pulled back from teeth. "He hurt him." Morwaine tilted his head. "I kept him alive," he corrected gently. "For you, because you are predictable in one way only." Vayrelis felt the lunar mark burn again. The pain came with a command that was not a word but a shape. "Kneel." Her front legs trembled. Her body fought itself. Sevrix's hands tightened on her arm. "Fight it," he said. "The shadow mark is not his. Use it, anchor in it." Orinder made a choking sound. The rune cord vibrated. His eyes rolled back. Then the ancient voice tore out of him, ragged and furious, carrying across the roof like a blade dragged over stone. "Bring her to the throne." Morwen's smile deepened with satisfaction. "You hear it," he said, looking at Kaiiltar as if addressing a child. "The old law, the real law. Your line has been guarding a cage for centuries and calling it a crown." Kaiiltar's sword lifted slightly. "You are the one who made the cage." Morwen's eyes gleamed. "No, I simply found the key you misplaced." Vayrelis's gaze snapped to her brother again. He shook his head weakly, trying to warn her with the only movement he could. "Do not." Vayrelis's chest heaved. In her mind, the whisper rose again, clearer now that pain had scraped her raw. Break the cage. She understood it differently now. The cage was not the Noct beast. The cage was the throne. The cage was the bond they tried to forge by force. The cage was the word Omega used as a chain. Morwen lifted his hand toward her, fingers relaxed like a man calling a pet. "Come," he said. "Back to the throne, speak the oath, complete what you were made for, and I will give you your brother whole." Vayrelis took one more step, and the lunar mark flared so hard her vision whitened. She dropped to one knee. A sound tore out of her that was pure rage. The city below erupted in screams. The Noct beast lunged at Morwen, but the moon iron chains snapped outward, glowing with pale sigils. They caught the beast mid-leap and yanked it down, forcing it to slam into stone. The beast thrashed, snarling, but the chains drank its strength. Morwen watched it with calm interest. "Yes," he murmured, "this is why we do it." Kaiiltar moved, a blur of disciplined violence. He cut one chain. Sparks flew. The sigils flared and burned his blade, but he did not stop. He cut again. Morwen lifted 2 fingers. Kaiiltar's body jerked as if struck. Vayrelis felt it like a hook in her own ribs. Morwen was not just holding her chain. He was tugging on all of them, using the throne's old wards like puppet strings. Sevrix's face tightened. "He is tied into the palace," he said. "He is using the throne as a spine." Vayrelis's brother lifted his head again, eyes clearing for one heartbeat. "Vay," he rasped. "Do not go to the throne. He needs you there." Morwen's guard struck him across the mouth. Blood spattered. Vayrelis's vision went dark at the edges. The shadow mark pulsed once, cool and heavy, like a hand closing around a knife. She focused on it, not on pain, not on fear, on the dark that did not belong to Morwen. The lunar mark screamed for obedience. The shadow mark whispered for choice. Vayrelis forced herself upright. Her body trembled, but she stood. She lifted her head and looked straight at Morwen. In the night air, her voice came out rough, layered with something that was not human, but it was hers. "No," Morwen's smile flickered. A single crack quickly sealed. "You will," he said softly. "You were rewritten to." Vayrelis took a breath and smelled Kaiiltar behind her. Cold, clean, controlled. She turned her head slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. In his face, she saw fear for her and fury for what was being done to her. But she also saw the thing she had been starving for since the cage. Respect. Not ownership, not hunger disguised as care. Kaiiltar's voice lowered, meant only for her. "If you let him pull you to the throne, he wins." Vayrelis's throat tightened. "Then how do I stop him?" Kaiiltar's gaze held hers like a vow. "Choose your bond," he said. "Not his, not the palace's, yours." Sevrix's eyes sharpened as if he understood the shape of the solution before she did. "The lunar mark binds you to the throne's will," he said quickly. "But marks answer meaning. If you redefine what it binds you to, you can redirect the chain." Morwen laughed softly. "Pretty theory." Vayrelis's heart slammed. Redefine. Choice. Her gaze locked on Kaiiltar again. All the dangerous heat between them, every moment of proximity, every time his control slipped and he hated himself for it, every time he protected her without touching her like he feared becoming the very thing he despised. Vayrelis stepped closer to him. Kaiiltar's breath caught. His eyes widened a fraction, then hardened with restraint. He did not move to grab her. He did not move to claim. He waited. That alone made her chest ache. Vayrelis lifted her marked hand, palm open, showing him the lunar mark even though it hurt like fire. "If I do this," she said, voice shaking, "it will not be a collar." Kaiiltar's throat worked. I do not want a collar. It will be a choice, she insisted, words raw. A promise, not ownership. Kaiiltar nodded once, like a man accepting a blade offered hilt first. Then I accept, Vayrelis inhaled. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his, horns angled away so she would not hurt him. The contact was simple, intimate, and it hit her harder than any chain. Kaiiltar's hands hovered at her sides, not touching until she made a sound that was half a plea. Hold me, she whispered. He did. His arms wrapped around her, steady and strong, and for one heartbeat she felt what it would be like to be safe without being caged. Her sense surged, storm and night, and something that belonged to no law. It wrapped around him. Kaiiltar's control shuddered. He did not bite. He did not force. He simply breathed her in like a vow. Vayrelis felt the lunar mark flare, and for the first time it did not feel like a chain dragging her to the throne. It felt like a ring closing around two hands clasped together. Morwen's eyes widened. The command to kneel snapped and recoiled like a whip that had struck iron. Vayrelis turned her eclipse gaze back to him. Her voice came out steady now. You do not own my bond, she said. You do not own my scent. You do not own my name. Morwen's smile turned thin. Then I will take your brother S, he said, and snapped his fingers. The guard yanked the chain hard enough to pull her brother forward, toward the roof edge. Vayrelis moved, not in panic, in precision. The Noct beast roared, and the shadow mark on Vayrelis's arm answered like a drum. Power surged through her limbs. She launched herself across the roof, faster than any Omega had the right to be, horns cutting the night like crescents. Morwen's guards raised moon iron chains. Kaiiltar's sword flashed behind her, cutting one chain mid-swing, opening a path. Sevrix hurled a small vial. It shattered against stone, releasing a sharp, metallic scent that made the moon iron sigils flicker for a heartbeat. Tyrn pushed off the chimney and slammed into the second guard, shoulder first, driving him back. The guard's chain wrapped around Tyrn's arm and burned. Tyrn hissed but did not stop. His eyes were bright with pain and grim joy. Now, he rasped at Vayrelis. Now. Vayrelis reached her brother and caught him as he stumbled. His body was light, too light, drugged. His eyes found hers again. You look terrible, he whispered hoarsely, and the attempt at humor almost broke her. She pressed her forehead to his briefly, breath shaking. I am here. Morwen stepped closer, calm cracking into irritation. Touching, he murmured. Bring her. The air tightened. The ancient voice inside Orinder surged again, straining against the rune cord, and the palace beneath them answered with a low hum that vibrated through roof stone into Vayrelis's bones. The throne was calling. Morwen lifted his hands, and the moonlight itself seemed to sharpen, turning into pale threads that reached for Vayrelis like fingers. Sevrix's voice snapped. He is opening the path to the throne from here. He will drag you through the palace wards like a net. Vayrelis looked down at her brother. Can you run? He tried to stand straight and failed. Kaiiltar appeared at her side, blade raised. I will carry him, he said, and then hesitated, eyes flicking to Vayrelis as if asking permission. The smallest thing. Consent even now. Vayrelis nodded once. Do it. Kaiiltar lifted her brother with careful strength, keeping his body shielded behind his own. Morwen's mouth tightened. Heir, he said softly, you are making yourself a traitor. Kaiiltar's eyes were ice. I am making myself a king. He turned and they ran, not away from the palace. Into it, down through a roof hatch and into a narrow stairwell that smelled of dust and cold metal. The palace shook with distant shouting. Gates clanged. Boots thundered. Somewhere, Kaiiltar's scent net still crawled through corridors like invisible spiders. Sevrix led them through a service passage and into the underways, moving like a man who had mapped this maze in his sleep. Tyrn limped behind, blood no longer glowing so strongly, but still too pale. Orinder stumbled between Sevrix and Tyrn, gagging against the rune cord as if the thing inside him was trying to claw its way up his throat. Vayrelis kept pace, the Noct beast padding silently beside her in the shadows, chains broken now, eyes fixed forward. "Where are we going?" her brother rasped from Kaiiltar's arms. Vayrelis answered without looking away from the path. "To break the cage." Sevrix glanced back, eyes sharp. "The chapel," he said. "Under the throne, the blade obeyed you for a reason. The fresco was not a warning. It was an instruction." Behind them, Morwen's calm voice echoed through stone, closer now, as if he walked inside the walls. "There is no escape from a story written in blood." Orinder jerked hard. His eyes rolled back. The ancient voice burst out of him again, stronger. "Not escape. Return." Vayrelis's shadow mark flared, and the Noct beast snarled, snapping its jaws inches from Orinder's face. Orinder sobbed. "I am sorry," he choked. "I tried to play her like a song. I did not know what I was inviting in." Sevrix's voice stayed cold. "Save your apology for living long enough to earn it." They reached the chapel door. It stood open. Cold air spilled out like breath. Inside, candles burned where there had been none before, pale flames wavering without wind. The fresco on the wall seemed brighter, the painted Vayrelis staring down with eyes that looked too alive. And at the altar beneath the fresco, the throne's hum deepened into a pulse. Morwen was already there. He stood with his hands behind his back, smiling gently as if he had been waiting for guests. On his finger, the ring glinted. On the stone floor at his feet lay another body. Not a fake this time. A man bound in moon iron, face bruised, eyes blazing with furious life. Vayrelis's stomach dropped, her brother's twin, not by blood, by shared hunger and shared fear and shared years. The boy who had been taken with her from the black market, the one she had called brother, because the word was the only home she had left. Morwen had found the other chain. Lifted his hand, and Vayrelis's real brother in Kaiiltar's arms groaned, as if the mark on Vayrelis's palm had been hooked straight through his ribs. Vayrelis staggered. Morwen's voice was velvet. "You see," he murmured, "a bond is a lever. I only need the right fulcrum." Kaiiltar set Vayrelis's brother down gently behind him, then stepped forward, sword raised. "Enough." Morwen's gaze slid over Kaiiltar, unimpressed. "You were never the center of this, Heir. You were always the guard dog at the gate." Kaiiltar's grip tightened on his blade. "And you were always the parasite in the house." Morwen's smile finally sharpened. "Yes." He snapped his fingers. Moon iron sigils flared across the chapel floor, lines of pale light carving a circle around Vayrelis, around the altar, around the throne's invisible presence. The runes rose like bars. A cage. The lunar mark in Vayrelis's palm burned. Her shadow mark burned colder. Morwen stepped backward, safely outside the circle, and inclined his head. "Now," he said softly, "speak the oath. Speak a name. Give the throne what it demands." Kamara's voice drifted from the chapel entrance, sweet as poison. "Do it," she murmured. "End the chaos. Let us put you where you belong." She stood there in her white cloak, eyes glittering, her wound hidden under silk. Behind her, guards waited, tense as hounds. Vayrelis looked from Morwen to Kamara and felt something settle in her chest. Clarity. They had always expected her to choose between cages. Morwen's cage, Kamara's cage, the throne's cage. Even Kaiiltar's protection could have become a cage if he had been weaker than his honor. But he had not been. Vayrelis lifted her head and turned to Kaiiltar. He stood outside the rune's circle, barred from her by pale light, jaw clenched, eyes furious and helpless. "Vayrelis," he said, voice rough, "do not give him what he wants." Vayrelis's throat tightened. "He has my brothers," she whispered. Kaiiltar's eyes softened with something that hurt to see. "I know." Sevrix stepped close to the circle, studying the runes. "They are keyed to your lunar mark," he said. "If you try to brute force them, they will tear you apart." Morwen smiled at Sevrix. "Clever healer, I warned you about meddling." Sevrix's gaze stayed flat. "I did not come to meddle," he said. "I came to cut." Tyrn limped forward, stopping beside Sevrix. He lifted his chin, eyes bright with pain and defiance. "I came to die," he said lightly, "unless someone finally does me the kindness of tearing out my leash." Morwen's eyes narrowed. "You will not be freed." Tyrn smiled, knife sharp. "Watch." Vayrelis felt her shadow mark pulse. She looked at the Noct beast, still and silent behind her, eyes fixed on the runes. Then she looked at Orinder. He knelt, shaking, rune cord tight, eyes wet. "It is in me," he whispered. "It wants your voice. It wants your name. It wants your mouth to finish what it started." Vayrelis's claws curled. She knew what Morwen wanted. He wanted her to say Kaiiltar's name and bind herself to the throne through him, turning the air into the handle of her leash. If she refused, he would kill her brothers and call it justice. If she spoke another name, the throne might still accept the oath and close around her. So she would speak the one name neither Morwen nor Kamara could use as a chain. Her own, not the alley name, not the name whispered by Orinder. The true name buried under fear, the one that belonged only to her. The name she had not spoken because to speak it was to admit she still existed under all the rewriting. She exhaled. Morwen lifted a hand as if conducting an orchestra. "Speak," he said. Vayrelis's voice rose, steady, carrying through the chapel. "I belong to myself." The rune bars flickered. Morwen's smile faltered. Kamara's eyes widened in furious disbelief. Vayrelis lifted her marked hand and pressed her palm to her chest, right over her heart, and then spoke her true name into the air like a knife cutting silk. The throne's hum changed. It did not deepen. It cracked. The runes around her flared white, then shattered into sparks like glass struck by a hammer. Sevrix inhaled sharply. "Yes," he whispered, as if relief had been strangling him for years. Morwen's calm finally broke. "No," he snapped, voice hard for the first time. "That is not the oath." Vayrelis stepped forward out of the broken circle, the lunar blade lifting in her hand almost of its own accord. "It is mine," she said. The Noct beast moved with her, shoulder brushing her hip in a gesture so protective it felt intimate. Morwen's eyes darted to the blade. "Put that down." Vayrelis smiled without warmth. "You are afraid." Morwen's lip curled. "I am annoyed." Behind him, the painted moons on the chapel ceiling seemed to dim, as if the light itself was listening. Orinder screamed. The ancient voice in him surged again, but now it sounded strained, panicked. "Stop her." Vayrelis turned and crossed to Orinder in 3 strides. She did not hesitate. She pressed 2 fingers to his throat, feeling the parasite voice vibrating there like a second heartbeat. "Orinder," she said, voice low, "do you want to be free?" His eyes met hers, full of terror and desperate hope. He nodded, barely able to move. Vayrelis lifted the lunar blade and drew its edge carefully across the rune cord at his throat. The cord snapped. The ancient voice shrieked, bursting out of Orinder's mouth like black smoke ripped from a wound. The smoke coiled in the air, forming a shape like a crown made of shadows. It turned toward Morwen. Morwen's eyes flashed with triumph for one heartbeat. "Come," he commanded. The shadow crown hesitated. Then the Noct beast growled, low and deep, and the shadow mark on Vayrelis's arm blazed with cold light. The shadow crown jerked as if yanked by a chain, not to Morwen, to Vayrelis. Morwen's face went white with sudden fury. "Impossible." Vayrelis's voice stayed calm. "You used him as a mouth," she said, nodding at Orinder. "You tried to use me as a key, but you forgot something." She stepped closer, lunar blade angled down, not threatening yet. "A key chooses what it opens," she said, "and I am done opening cages for you." Morwen's hands lifted. Moonlight sharpened again, turning into pale threads, reaching for her throat, her wrists, her marks. Kaiiltar moved at the same time. He lunged, sword flashing, cutting through the pale threads as if they were silk. Sparks flew. The threads recoiled. Morwen's gaze snapped to him. "You cannot cut what is written into the throne." Kaiiltar's voice was ice. "Then I will cut you." They clashed. Morwen did not fight like a swordsman. He fought like a man pulling laws out of air, turning palace wards into weapons. Pale sigils whipped around Kaiiltar, trying to bind his limbs. Kaiiltar kept moving, disciplined, relentless, refusing to be still long enough to be caged. Kamara stepped forward, eyes bright. "Morwine," she purred, "let me take her. Let me keep her." Morwine snapped, "Stay back." Kamara's smile sharpened into hatred. "You do not command me." She shifted, scales rippling beneath her skin, eyes slitting. Her tongue flicked. Then she lunged at Vayrelis. Vayrelis met her with the lunar blade. Steel sang. Kamara recoiled with a hiss as the blade's pale edge kissed her shoulder and left a burning line that refused to close. Her eyes flared with shock and pain. "That blade," she whispered, voice trembling with rage, "is not for you." Vayrelis's gaze stayed steady. "Neither is my body." Kamara struck again, fast and vicious. Vayrelis stepped aside, letting the Noct beast snap at Kamara's cloak, tearing white fabric like paper. Kamara stumbled back, breath ragged. For a heartbeat, her saintly mask cracked completely. "I kept Omegas alive," she spat. "I fed them, I housed them." "You caged them," Vayrelis said, and drove the lunar blade into the stone at Kamara's feet. The sigils along the blade flared. A pale circle flashed under Kamara, not a cage, but a mirror of the circle Morwine had tried to trap Vayrelis in. Kamara froze, eyes widening in sudden terror as the pale light climbed her legs like bindings. Sevrix shouted, "Now." She is caught in the throne's ward reflection. Tyron moved like a man who had been waiting for this moment his whole life. He lunged and slammed his palm against Kamara's chest, right over her heart, where the Omega House emblem was stitched into her cloak. His silver blood glimmered faintly under his skin as if answering something. Kamara screamed. The pale circle tightened, not killing her, but holding her, forcing her still, forcing her to feel what it was to be restrained by a will stronger than hers. Tyron smiled through gritted teeth. "Enjoy the cage," he rasped. "Saint," Morwine roared in fury, and the palace wards surged hard enough to make the chapel tremble. Candles guttered, dust fell from the ceiling like ash. Sevrix grabbed Tyron's arm. "Your seal," he said urgently. "Now, while the ward system is unstable." Tyron swallowed, fear flashing. "Do it." Sevrix looked at Vayrelis. "Your blade," he said. Vayrelis moved to Tyron. His shirt was already torn from earlier, exposing the brand on his ribs. It pulsed faintly, the same pale light as the palace wards. Vayrelis knelt and held the lunar blade above it, hands steady despite the chaos. Tyron's eyes met hers, and the knife's smile softened into something almost human. "If I scream," he murmured, "pretend it is funny." Vayrelis's throat tightened. "I will pretend nothing." She lowered the blade and sliced the brand cleanly, not through flesh, but through the magic stitched into it. The effect was immediate. Light burst outward, then snapped inward like a breath sucked back. Tyron arched with a strangled cry, body shaking. Then the silver glow under his skin dimmed, fading into normal heat. Tyron collapsed forward, panting, alive. Sevrix grabbed his shoulders, checking him with quick, precise touches. For the first time, Sevrix looked relieved. "It is gone," he whispered. "You are yours." Tyron's laugh came out broken. "I forgot what that feels like." Across the chapel, Kaiiltar slammed Morwine backward into the altar steps. Morwine staggered but did not fall. His eyes were wild now, the gentle mask gone. The shadow crown, ripped out of Orinder, hovered in the air, vibrating with rage and hunger. It lunged toward Vayrelis again, desperate, and Vayrelis lifted her shadow-marked arm. The Noct beast growled. Vayrelis felt the shadow mark tighten like a fist. The shadow crown halted mid-air, trembling, then bowed. Morwine's face twisted. "That power is not yours," he spat. "It belongs to the first king, to the hollow moon." Vayrelis's blood ran cold. "The voice," she said, understanding snapping into place. "It is not a ghost. It is a thing that wears voices." Morwine's eyes gleamed. "Yes," he hissed. "And I offered it a body, mine, a throne, this world." Vayrelis looked at him and saw it now, the faint wrongness behind his eyes, the way his calm had always felt rehearsed. He was not just a man. He was a door left open too long. Vayrelis stepped closer, lunar blade lifting. Morwen sneered. "If you strike me, you strike the regent. The realm will burn for it." Kaiiltar's voice cut in, sharp and final. "The realm is burning because of you." Vayrelis's gaze flicked to her brother on the floor behind Kaiiltar, groaning, trying to sit up. Her other brother, the one Morwen had thrown down earlier, still lay bound near Morwen's feet, eyes blazing with helpless fury. Morwen saw her hesitation and smiled cruelly. "Choose," he whispered. "Strike me and I kill them." Vayrelis's marks pulsed. The lunar mark hummed with the throne's old command. The shadow mark hummed with the Noct's old loyalty. She realized then what the fresco had meant. Not that she would chain the Noct beast, that she would chain what truly deserved a cage. Vayrelis lifted her head. "I will choose," she said softly. Morwen leaned in, hungry, confident. Vayrelis turned the lunar blade in her grip, not aiming at his body. She aimed at the ring on his finger. Morwen's smile faltered. "No," Vayrelis struck. The blade kissed the ring and the metal screamed, not like jewelry breaking, like a spell shattering. The ring split cleanly. Pale light poured out like trapped breath. A shockwave rippled through the chapel. Morwen staggered back, clutching his hand, eyes wide with sudden fear. From the broken ring, a thin thread of pale magic snapped, and Vayrelis felt something release. Her brothers gasped at the same time, as if a pressure had been lifted from their throats. Morwen screamed, voice tearing. "You do not understand. That ring was my anchor." Vayrelis's voice stayed cold. "It was my chain," she corrected. The shadow crown shrieked and surged toward Morwen, frantic now that its anchor was broken. Morwen reached for it like a drowning man reaching for air. "Come back," he hissed. Vayrelis raised her shadow-marked arm and pulled. The shadow crown jerked away from Morwen and slammed into the floor at Vayrelis's feet like a creature forced to kneel. The Noct beast pressed close behind her, a wall of dark fur and eclipse eyes. Vayrelis looked down at the crown of shadow and felt no pity. "Cage," she whispered. The lunar blade flared. The chapel floor sigils, destabilized and broken, answered her now, not Morwen. Pale light surged up, forming bars around the shadow crown, not touching it, but containing it. The shadow crown thrashed, screaming in a dozen stolen voices. Orander clutched his throat and sobbed with relief as the last of the parasite's pressure released from him. Morwen lunged toward the cage, face twisted with desperation. "No," he snarled. "That belongs to me." Kaiiltar intercepted him. One clean strike. The flat of Kaiiltar's blade hit Morwen's jaw, not killing him, but dropping him hard onto the stone. Morwen's head snapped sideways. Blood pooled at his mouth. He looked up dazed, and for the first time his eyes looked empty, like a curtain had been torn down. Whatever had been inside him was in the cage now. Sevrix exhaled, a sound that was almost a laugh. "It is done," he murmured. Kamira screamed again from within the ward's circle, thrashing like a snake pinned by a spear. Her eyes were wild. "You cannot do this," she hissed. "I am the Omega House. Without me, you have nothing." Vayrelis turned toward her. Slowly, she walked to the ward circle where Kamira was trapped. Every step felt like walking out of an old life. "You are right about one thing," Vayrelis said, voice steady. "Without you, the house will be different." Kamira's eyes narrowed. "You will fail. They will beg for me back." Vayrelis leaned closer, gaze unwavering. "Then we will build a world where no one has to beg a predator for shelter," she said. Kamira's lips curled. "Pretty words." Vayrelis straightened and looked at the guards who hovered at the chapel entrance, uncertain now that Morwen lay bleeding and Kamira was bound. "You saw what she is," Vayrelis said, voice carrying. "You saw what he was." The guards hesitated, then lowered their weapons. One of them swallowed hard. "Heir Kaiiltar," he said, voice shaking, "orders." Kaiiltar stepped forward, wiping blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. His eyes swept the room, taking in Morwen on the floor, Kaiiltar trapped, the shadow cage, the Noct beast standing like a living verdict. Then he looked at Vayrelis. Not to claim, to ask. Vayrelis nodded once. Kaiiltar turned to the guards. His voice became the voice of the throne they had been pretending was empty. "Arrest Archon Morwen for treason, unlawful binding, and sacrilege," he said. "Arrest Lady Kaiiltar for unlawful coercion, scent manipulation, and abuse of candidates." A ripple of shock ran through the guards. Kaiiltar's gaze turned lethal. Now, they moved. Chains clinked. Morwen groaned as hands hauled him up. Kaiiltar shrieked as ward light dimmed enough for them to drag her from the circle, still restrained. In the corner, the shadow cage trembled but held. Sevrix approached Vayrelis cautiously, eyes on her horns, her fur, her eclipse gaze. For all his knowledge, he still looked like a man standing too close to a living myth. "It will not hold forever," he said quietly, nodding at the shadow cage. "That thing will seek cracks." Vayrelis's voice softened slightly. "Then we will seal the cracks." Orander stepped forward, rubbing his throat, eyes haunted. "I can help," he whispered. "I owe you more than my apology. I can sing wards that soothe, not bind." Tyron leaned against the wall, still shaking from the seal being cut, but smiling faintly. "Look at us," he murmured. "A healer, a singer, a knife, an heir, and a monster Omega who refuses to kneel." Vayrelis looked at him. Not a monster. Tyron's smile sharpened, gentler than it had any right to be. "No," he agreed. "A storm." Vayrelis turned to her brothers. Kaiiltar had set the one he carried down against a pillar. Sevrix knelt beside him, checking his pupils, pressing something bitter under his tongue to clear the drug. The bound brother on the floor had been freed by a guard. Sat up slowly, face bruised but eyes fierce. When his gaze met Vayrelis's, he laughed once, ragged. "You always did steal the loudest trouble," he rasped. Vayrelis's throat closed. She dropped to her knees in front of them, hands trembling, and pulled them both into her arms. Her fur brushed their cheeks. Her horns angled away, careful. Her brothers clung to her like men who had been drowning and finally found air. For a moment, the chapel smelled like salt and relief and something painfully human. Kaiiltar stood nearby, watching with a restraint that looked like agony. Vayrelis lifted her head and met his eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Kaiiltar's throat worked. "I did not save them," he said, voice rough. "You did. You chose," Vayrelis corrected, "when it mattered." Kaiiltar stepped closer, careful, and held out his hand, palm up, as if offering rather than taking. Vayrelis looked at it for a long beat. Then she placed her clawed hand into his. The contact sent a quiet shock through her body, not the violent pull of the lunar mark, but a warm steadiness that made her want to lean into him and finally stop fighting every breath. Kaiiltar's fingers closed around hers, gentle despite the strength in them. "When this is over," he said softly, "I will not ask you to become a symbol." Vayrelis's eyes narrowed. "Good. I will ask you what you want," he said, "and I will listen." Vayrelis swallowed hard. "I want my brother safe," she said. "I want the Omega house rebuilt without cages. I want the laws that call us property torn apart." Kaiiltar nodded. "Then we begin tomorrow." Sevrix rose, wiping his hands, calm returned now that the immediate bleeding had stopped. "Tomorrow," he echoed, "we will have a court that wants answers." Tyron snorted. "And nobles who want someone to blame." Kaiiltar's gaze hardened. "Let them blame me," he said. "I will wear it." Vayrelis's chest tightened at the quiet certainty in his voice. Her shadow mark pulsed, and she felt the Noct beast press closer behind her like a silent oath. Not to the throne, to her. In the days that followed, the palace changed. It did not change because nobles suddenly grew kind. It changed because the lie had cracked in front of too many eyes to be stitched back together cleanly. Morwen's trial was held in the open hall, under the same banners that had once called him protector. Sevrix testified with calm precision, presenting the ring shards, and the signs of unlawful binding. Orinder sang the memory of the parasite voice in a way that made the crowd shiver, proving that Morwine had been a door for something old and hungry. Tyrn stood with his shirt open, showing the scar where the brand had been cut away, and the court saw the proof that Morwine had carved leashes into living flesh. When Morwine tried to smile, it looked like a man remembering a mask and forgetting how to wear it. Kamira's saintly image shattered faster. The candidates spoke. The servants spoke. The guards spoke. Stories poured out like blood from a wound that had been kept hidden too long. Kaiiltar did not let the court cover it with ceremony. He sat on the edge of the throne and refused to pretend it was sacred when it had been used as a cage. He did not crown himself that day. He did something more dangerous. He told the truth. The Omega House was placed under new stewardship, not a single head, but a council that included Omegas who had survived it and refused to become predators in return. Sevrix was given authority to dismantle the scent nets and breeding contracts hidden in Kamira's ledgers. He did it with frightening calm. Orinder, still haunted, volunteered to sing healing wards in the shelters, to undo the subtle emotional conditioning he had once been proud of manipulating. Tyrn, freed of his seal, refused titles. He took a job that made Kaiiltar's advisors nervous. He became the knife at the edge of the new order, the man who made sure no one tried to put a leash on the reforms when the public stopped watching. Vayrelis' brothers were given rooms in the palace, but they spent most of their days in the city, helping pull people out from under the old system. They were loud, stubborn, and alive. Every time Vayrelis saw them laughing, something in her chest unclenched. The Noct beast vanished back into the forest after the trial, but not before pressing its forehead to Vayrelis' once, a silent farewell that felt like family. Sometimes, on nights when the moon was thin, Vayrelis heard a howl far beyond the walls. It no longer sounded like an omen. It sounded like a guardian remembering her name. And Kaiiltar, he did not come to her room like an owner. He came like a man asking permission to step into her space. The first night they were alone after the trials, he stood by the door and did not cross until she nodded. When he finally touched her, it was careful. His fingers brushed her cheek where bruises had faded. His thumb traced the edge of her jaw as if memorizing the shape of her face. Vayrelis' breath caught, heat blooming low and aching, the old Omegaverse instinct trying to turn want into surrender. She did not surrender. She reached up, grabbed the front of his tunic, and pulled him closer. Kaiiltar's eyes darkened. His control shuddered, but he held it like a vow. "I want you," Vayrelis whispered, voice shaking, "but I will not be claimed." Kaiiltar's forehead touched hers. "Then do not be," he murmured, "be chosen." Vayrelis swallowed hard. "And if one day I leave?" Kaiiltar's throat worked. "Then I will let you," he said, and the honesty in it was so sharp it hurt. "And I will still want you." Vayrelis' eyes stung. "That sounds like pain." Kaiiltar's mouth brushed the corner of hers, not quite a kiss, a question made of breath. "It is," he admitted, "but it is real." Vayrelis closed the distance and kissed him. It was not gentle at first. It was desperate, like proving to herself that desire could exist without chains. Kaiiltar answered her with restraint that made it hotter, his hands sliding to her waist and stopping there, holding her like he was afraid of breaking her and afraid of losing her. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Vayrelis rested her forehead against his. "Tomorrow," she whispered, half laughing, half trembling, "you will have nobles demanding I become your symbol." Kaiiltar's eyes stayed on hers. "Tomorrow," he said, "I will tell them you are not my symbol." Vayrelis' chest tightened. "What will you call me?" Kaiiltar's voice lowered. "My equal," he said, "if you want it. My bond, chosen, not forced. My queen, if you ever decide to wear that word." Vayrelis' marks pulsed, not burning now, but warm, alive. She thought of the fresco in the chapel and finally understood the last piece. The painted version of her had not been warning her about destiny. It had been reminding her that myths could be rewritten too. She exhaled and let herself smile, small and real. "Not yet," she said, "but stay." Kaiiltar held her tighter. "Always," he whispered, "if you let me." Outside, the palace no longer hummed like a cage. It hummed like a house being rebuilt. And somewhere beyond stone and law, in a forest that remembered old blood and older songs, the Noct beast lifted its head to the moon and howled once, long and steady, not a threat, not a prophecy. A promise that the night would no longer be owned.